So the Public Safety and Human Relations Commission of the City of San Bernardino has been called to order. The Pledge of Allegiance has been led by Commissioner Carrillo. We'll ask Susie to do roll call.
Commissioner Lanas. Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Walters is excused. He advised that he is unable to attend.
Commissioner Kelly is online. I see her.
Yeah, she was muted, so I checked her.
I'm here.
But Commissioner Lanas? She's not on? Okay.
No.
Vice Chair Tombach?
Present.
Commissioner Peden?
Present.
Commissioner Jarman?
Present.
Commissioner Cervantes?
Present.
Commissioner Carrillo?
Present.
Chairman Elliott?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. May I ask Susie if there are public comments for any of the items listed and not listed on the agenda? Did you receive any public comments, or do we have any to hear?
No, there are none.
Thank you very much. All right. First item, does everybody have a copy of the the agenda and the previous minutes? There were some people didn't get it, so Susie resent out a link to all of that just moments ago, just to make sure that everybody has it. Okay. Item number 1 is the approval of the draft minutes. That is the previous minutes of
The very last meeting, March 9th of 2020, a year ago.
Thank you, March 2020. Thank you. Is there a motion on those previous minutes? You'll have to unmute if you want to say anything.
I'm still kind of reading through them real quick.
All right. Anyone else want to offer a motion to approve?
I'm not. Mine is still printing. However, I think we can go ahead and approve.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Moved in second. Jarman and Tombach. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone who opposes? Thank you. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Members present. All right. Second item is the approval of recognitions. And so for our new members, our new commissioners who've just recently joined us, we started a program through the commission that we would take a look on. Our commission has we have 3 different areas that we're in charge of, as it were, or related to. One is police, the second is fire, the third is public works. And so within our purview, we adopted a program that went into the various departments, at least the 3 that we're connected to, and we looked for employees of the city who had gone or go over and beyond their normal. We recognized that we had just come through bankruptcy. We're a skeleton crew, and we thought that it would be right to acknowledge some of the staff who just go over and beyond in trying to doing a great job for the city. To that end, each of those 3 areas, fire, police, and public works, we're able to get names of potential candidates through their directors, and then the commission or the subcommittees, and I'll get into more of that later because I know some of the newer commissioners need to be aware, would then filter and vet those out and ultimately bring forward at least some for recognition. Tonight we have, and mind you, this was a year ago. We've not met in a year, but we still, these people were already brought forth, and they were brought forth and came through the channels and brought through the commission. So we still wanted to make sure that we, kept our word on that. We received so the ultimate nominees are from the police department, from Sergeant John Echeverria. He recognized a volunteer who gave numerous hours to the city, and that volunteer's name was Pat Kilmer. And you should have seen some of that in your backup that you received for there. The second one we received, from the Public Works Department, Mr. Tim O'Neill, who's been with the city 10 years as an administrative analyst too. We also received from the Public Works Department, Gracie Johnson, who is an integrated waste management field inspector. Again, she's been here 18 years, recommended through the department. We received Officer John Phillips from the San Bernardino PD, from the Traffic Enforcement Unit. He has been with the department since 2015 and has met some super standards as it relates to the traffic division of the PD. And Miss Patsy Methvin, who is also in the traffic unit. She's a senior office assistant, and Patsy has been with San Bernardino PD since 2015. Those were the ultimate ones that were up for approval. Also, in our last meeting, the commissioners voted to recognize Susie, our secretary, who makes all this come together for us and has for years. And she's been with San Bernardino PD since 1999, but she has been our secretary since 2013. And the commission voted and approved to issue her a congratulatory certificate. So all of those, I'm hoping you can see them. All of those have the certificates as well as the narrative by their prospective supervisors, et cetera, et cetera. And those are our nominees for it was the first quarter of 2020. But nonetheless, we were shut down because of COVID. So those are our nominees. I just need a motion to support them, approve them.
I make the motion, Ricardo.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Who's the second?
Jesse?
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. All right, is there anyone opposed to it? That's probably easier. Anyone opposed? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll record it as unanimous. Obviously, we would have had mayor and council here to join us live. That's the way we've done it before, and we made the presentation to them. But obviously, under this circumstances, we will reach out and make arrangements with their supervisors to present them to them at work. All right. Our next item is staff reports. We start with our traffic incident data by the, I'm sorry, am I reading the right thing here? No, I'm not. I'm on the wrong one. I'm very sorry. Staff report. It looks like year-end reports for the police, county, fire, and public works. Again, I'll be a little explanatory tonight because we have several new commissioners. What we ask each of
Mr.
our...
Chairman, the presentations are next.
I just did them.
Number 3 on the agenda. Year-end reports for police, county fire, and public works.
That's where I'm at.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So what we did for our new commissioners is we asked each of our units, police, fire, and public works, to each bring us reports, and we get them each quarter from each of them. And again, since we haven't met for a year, all of the reports we'll hear from tonight are the actual year-end reports from the departments. Otherwise, we would have normally received them quarterly. Okay, with that, let me begin with the year-end report from the police department.
Hey, give me a moment and I'll open up the screen. I'll share the screen.
Thank you. While Susie's handling that, let me introduce myself. I'm Captain Brian Pellis with the Police Department. Chief McBride was unexpectedly called away this afternoon to attend to a family matter. He apologizes for not being able to join you this evening and present this report for himself. But he asked me to stand in his place and give you this information that he provided to the City Council at his regular meeting on January 20th. So anybody who has an interest in seeing this report from the chief himself, I encourage you to go back to the clerk's web portal and take a look at the video from the January 20th meeting. I'll do my best to give justice to his PowerPoint presentation. So I ask that you bear with me just a little bit as I proceed through these slides. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Susie, the first slide, please. Are we able to advance to the first slide? Might be having another technical difficulty here. Susie, are you there?
We can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you, Captain. If you want to just go ahead.
All
The
right.
document is in the backup. It is posted on the website, so it is. We
All
meet
right.
we meet with Brown. If you want to just go ahead, we have it.
Very good then. So our first slide is titled Crime Statistics. And this is our UCR Part 1 data for the calendar year of 2020. As you mentioned earlier, this data is a year-end review that was presented to Council in January. I'd like to just mention briefly that our 2020 UCR data is not completely finalized. So this is tentative data that will be further clarified before it's submitted to the federal government. But this gives you a little snapshot of what we dealt with in terms of crime year over year from 2019 to 2020. And as you can see, it was a challenging year for the police department in our community. But I'd like to underscore the fact that it was a challenging year for police departments and communities nationwide as I move through this slide. So the good news is overall crime decreased in the city of San Bernardino by just under 17%. There was an increase in homicides and violent crime, which I'm sure you're all aware of. In fact, we had close to a 57% increase in the murder rate year over year, as well as a nearly 30% increase in aggravated assaults. I'll talk to you a little bit about why we think that occurred, but before I get there, I'd like to balance that out with the fact that other crime, in particular, property crime, was reduced heavily over year over year, with an overall result of a reduction in crime in our city. So why is violent crime and homicides up? If you can go to the next slide, Susie. An assessment by the Major Cities Chief Association conducted a study which demonstrated that of the 67 major cities studied and surveyed, 84% of those cities actually reported an increase in homicides and other violent crime in the year 2020. To the right of the slide, you'll actually see some of those representative cities. Los Angeles had an increase of 33%, Milwaukee 110%, Omaha was at 150%, Spokane 275%. So certainly while our increase in homicides at 56% is absolutely notable, we saw the same or similar, in some cases, much higher increases in the homicide rate throughout the country. So it's always difficult to specifically peg the reasons why we see an increase in crime or a decrease in crime for that matter. But what we did is we looked at a Police Executive Research Forum survey of police chiefs conducted throughout the country. And here's some of the highlights from the results of those surveys. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed people under tremendous stress, as we all know. And unfortunately, sometimes the result of that stress is violent crime. In addition, we've seen a significant increase in the early release of inmates to avoid the COVID-19 problem in a custody setting. So in essence, jails and prisons throughout the state of California have released a number of inmates as a result of COVID-19, trying to keep that virus from spreading in a custody environment. And certainly, one follows the other. When we see a release of convicted inmates into the community, we're bound to see an increase of recidivism and crime in particular. And so that's another cause cited by this survey as a reason for the spike in violent crime throughout the country. In addition to all of that, the criminal justice system itself has slowed down significantly because of COVID-19. For many months, our local courts were completely closed. And even since reopening, they've only done so on a limited basis, which has resulted in a fewer number of cases being brought up before a judge and then a jury during trial settings. And so there's been an overall decrease in the level of the ability of the criminal justice system as a whole to hold those accountable for violent crime. And so what we've seen as a result of all of that is a member of our criminal element in society has seen the fact that they are not being held immediately accountable for their indiscretions as has occurred in previous years. And so some of people have just simply taken advantage of this justice system slowdown. And then last, zero bail policies have been introduced to reduce COVID-19 spread. So what this means is typically when an individual is arrested for a crime, most notably a felony, but also misdemeanors, bail is set at a certain amount if the individual wants to seek release before seeing a judge. But because of COVID-19 and the idea of reducing jail numbers, a lot of counties, and ours included in California, resulted in a zero bail protocol whereby individuals will be booked, photographed, fingerprinted, and then immediately released without having to post any bail whatsoever. Next slide, please. So last year we had 69 homicides, and that number is a little bit variable, and I'll explain why. There are some cases that are investigated as a death investigation, which following our internal investigation, then a coroner's investigation might be closed as a homicide. So that number might go up as a result of that. Conversely, there are some cases where the district attorney might receive a filing from our department as a homicide, but might decide that the actual homicide was the result of a self-defense, which would therefore not be classified as a homicide any longer, which would cause the overall number to go down. But as of now, the number stands at 69. As you can see in the first bullet point there, of those 69 total murders in our city, firearms were used in 59 cases. And that's just a very alarming number. And we'll talk a little bit more about firearms as we progress through the slides today. Demographically, 65 of our victims were male, 4% were female. And one number that I'd like to highlight as excellent work done by members of our agency is that we've achieved a 75% clearance rate in the calendar year of 2020 versus the national average of 61%. And what that means is essentially we have identified the suspect and presented a criminal case to the district attorney in 75% of our homicides. We'd love for that number to be 100%, but we still do have those cases that pop up where it really is a whodunit type situation, where we have no witnesses, no video evidence or anything other than a deceased individual being discovered by a member of the public. Next slide, please. We looked a little bit closer into the 69 homicides. We attempted to break down some of the motives, excuse my lighting situation back here, for these homicides. And we found that verbal disputes were, by and large, the number one motivating factor for an individual to take the life of another. Again, I think this is largely related to the COVID-19 situation, with many individuals facing stressors that they haven't faced in the past, whether it be due to a lockdown situation, some folks losing their jobs, being in financial distress. I think that we've seen an increase in these verbal dispute homicides. Other categories that we normally see include domestic violence, child abuse, a homicide during a robbery, carjacking, or other felony, narcotics cases. Gang and narcotics related homicides were at 11, which is lower than I think most people expect, but that's what we saw in the calendar year of 2020. Dispensaries accounted for 6 homicides, and then unknown motives, at least at the time of this report, was at 16. Next slide, please. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but in looking into our homicides, we discovered that 19 of the homicides involved either a victim or a suspect who was released from prison or released from a county jail facility early, whether it be due to COVID-19 or an overcrowding court order. The bottom line was they had not yet finished their terms or sentences in a custody setting, but were released early back into society. So those 19 homicides that involved one of those individuals, either as a victim or as a suspect, could have been preventable. Had we maintained those folks in custody and had them serve their sentences, those homicides could not have occurred. So it's important to understand that the criminal justice system operates as a whole. No matter how much we strive to provide for public safety and to reduce crime in the city of San Bernardino, when these additional elements are introduced into our society, it tends to drive up the numbers of violent crimes and homicides in the community. Next slide, please. So what do we do in terms of responding to an increase in violent crime? Well, we take these 3 main approaches: suppression, prevention, and intervention. Crime suppression involves a lot of data-driven proactive patrols. With the availability of crime data and computers, we're able to isolate and identify locations and individuals that are more prone to being involved in violent crime situations. And what we're able to do with that data is direct police response, whether it be patrol officers or specialized assignment officers, to try to suppress that level of crime as reflected in the data. Prevention is always a key factor for a successful law enforcement agency, and what we use is our investigative teams to try to identify and arrest repeat violent offenders. As I think you're all aware, a large amount of crime is committed by a very small percentage of repeat offenders. So by identifying those offenders and addressing them in particular, we can reduce crime through prevention and increase our solvability rate. And the third category is intervention. As you're all aware as well, the city introduced the Violence Intervention Program, which strives to engage members of the community to try to reduce violent crime in the city by intervening soon after a violent crime occurs to try to prevent successive crimes that are related to that initial crime, and try to keep the pulse of the community to address any type of situation that might be occurring between whether it be feuding gang members or folks in our community that have an axe to grind that are prone to committing a violent crime as a result of that. We try to reach out to them and intervene before those violent crimes occur. Conflict resolution is a key component of this, and by engaging with our community partners who have not only a stake in the community, but are also credible to those individuals in the community that might be involved in violent crime, we've seen the ability to do a better job at intervention. Next slide, please. We also use our specialized investigative units. As most of you are likely aware, the department engaged in a reorganization in April and May of 2019. And a part of the reorganization was to bring back a couple of our very important specialized units, such as narcotics, our Vice Unit, and our Special Investigations Unit, which is specifically focused and assigned to address violent crime issues. And by deploying officers in this setting, not just in a patrol environment responding to calls for service, but actually conducting investigations and getting deep into the issues that relate to the instances of violent crimes, we've been able to address those issues much more directly. In addition to those special units, we use our directed patrols. We have a lot of officers that work out on overtime out in the community that are not responsible primarily for responding to calls for service. They let the patrol officers handle that, and they can instead be involved in crime suppression and investigative activities that helps with high visibility patrols in vulnerable areas, and also addressing the root of some of these criminal issues. And then, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we use our violence intervention program and community outreach through our district command system and our community policing officers to try to get to the root of some of these issues to prevent violent crime from occurring. To the right of this slide, you'll see some statistics, which I think we're very proud of here at the police department. Year over year, 2019 to 2020, we saw a significant increase in the number of weapons arrests. This is a result of a few different factors, not only having these additional patrols and specialized units out in the field, but also focusing on preventing some of these violent crime issues by addressing specific individuals who are more prone to commit them. And so we've seen an increase in overall arrests, which should indicate a reduction in violent crime, but because of the overwhelming issues we've dealt with in the year 2020, we still saw that increase. And then with regard to firearm recoveries, I mentioned to you earlier that 59 of our 69 homicides involved a firearm. And so what we're seeing in these numbers of firearm recoveries as well is that we're out there working hard, making arrests, identifying individuals who are carrying a firearm illegally, whether it be a convicted felon or someone who's prohibited from possessing a firearm. But despite the fact that we're making increased arrests year over year, we're still seeing a lot of that firearm-related violent crime. Next slide, please. So moving on to our traffic fatalities, we also saw a significant increase in traffic fatalities year over year. 257 in 2019, increasing to we're looking at the fatalities first. 48 in 2019, rising to 62 in 2020. There's a lot of reasons for this as well. I think most of you have seen for yourselves that we have a lot of pedestrian violations here in the city of San Bernardino. Pedestrians in the roadway, pedestrians crossing outside of a crosswalk. And as a result of that, 18 of those 62 traffic fatalities were the result of pedestrian-related violations. Of the 62 fatalities we saw last year, 33% of the drivers involved in those cases were under the influence of some type of substance. 17 of those cases were alcohol. 11 of those cases were actually marijuana. We've seen a significant increase in the number of marijuana-related DUI arrests now that marijuana has been decriminalized, largely in California. Folks aren't clearly aware that the use of marijuana can impair your driving much in the same way as alcohol does. And so we have seen an uptick in the number of marijuana-related cases. And those numbers are preliminary, and the reason for that is it takes quite a while to get results back from the crime lab when we take blood from a potentially incapacitated or inebriated driver. And so, again, those numbers are tentative, but we have seen an increase in both alcohol and marijuana-related fatal collisions in the city. Moving over to the next column, you look at DUI arrests. And again, we're seeing a situation which is a little bit perplexing, much like the fact that an increase in firearms-related arrests and weapons charges overall has not necessarily led to a decrease in violent crime. We also see that a 119% increase in DUI arrests year over year from 257 to 564 isn't necessarily reducing our fatal rate, including all TC-related fatalities. So again, there's a number of factors. We've seen more pedestrian violations, an uptick in marijuana use, and we've also seen an increase in huffing cases where a driver will be abusing an inhalant, which will cause them to, in many cases, black out, lose control, and cause a traffic collision. This is, as a side note, our highest number of DUI arrests in the last 15 years. So again, I'd like to take a moment to thank our officers out there every day doing their best to address these issues through proactive patrols, DUI checkpoints, saturations, and anything they can do to try to reduce this number of traffic fatalities and keep our communities safe. Next slide, please. I mentioned a little bit earlier too that 2019 we started a department reorganization, and part of that was reintroducing our community policing model, which we heavily relied upon in the 1990s and early 2000s, but got away from for some time in the 2000s and 2010s. So with regard to community policing, we've established 5 district commands, each of which is led by a lieutenant district commander, an operations sergeant, and 2 district resource officers. Previous to May of 2019, we had 1 quality of life team that was responsible for the entire city. And that team consisted of 5 police officers and 1 supervisor. It was woefully inadequate to address each issue that our community members raised. And I believe that by doubling that number, now we have 10 district resource officers in addition to 2 bicycle mounted enforcement team officers that are addressing community policing issues. We've seen an improvement in the ability to exercise the community policing model. And that's resulted in greater accountability. Each district commander is responsible for what occurs in their district, is responsible for producing improved connections with the community in their district, and is responsible for an equitable distribution of resources at our police department level. It also promotes flexibility and proactive policing within our department rather than simply responding to 911 calls, which is our core function. In addition, since the introduction or reintroduction of our community policing model in mid-2019, we've seen an increase and an improvement in our overall response times. I know some folks in the community feel like our response times have not improved, but when you look at the numbers, they speak for themselves. And all 4 of our top priority calls have seen improvements over that year 2019 to 2020, with a close to 20% increase in response time in our priority E emergency calls. So again, I know that some folks find this difficult to believe when they call the police and ask for a report. It might take us a few hours to get there. But as a reminder, we operate on a priority system. And so we respond to in-progress crimes and emergencies first, and we respond to crimes that have occurred in the past and report requests as a lower priority. And so a lot of our folks who have a concern about our response times are those who are waiting for police reports to be taken. And our goal is to get to every call as soon as we possibly can. It doesn't serve us any good to make anybody wait any longer than is necessary. And we certainly understand that, if we were to call the police ourselves, we would like them to respond as soon as possible. So those concerns do not go unnoticed, but I do want to highlight the fact that the numbers highlight that our response times have actually improved with the introduction of the community policing model. Next slide, please. Here's some stats for our community policing officers. I won't go through each of these numbers, but as you can see, these 10 officers and 2 additional bicycle officers have done a phenomenal job in the calendar year 2020 of producing some statistics. They've been making a huge number of arrests. As you're aware, they are primarily responsible for organizing transient camp cleanups and illegal dump cleanups. I'd like to highlight the fact that our Public Works Department has been a huge partner in this process. They provide the labor involved for cleaning these sites up. We provide the police escort services and help identify those locations that need to be cleaned up. But without that partnership, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the mission of trying to keep our city clean and free from these visible blight issues as much as we possibly can. We've also had close to 9,000 homeless contacts. One of our council members actually brought up, how do we have 9,000 contacts with only about 650 homeless folks in the city? And the answer is we contact the same individuals time and time again. Studies have shown that it takes upwards of 50 plus contacts with a single homeless individual before that individual is likely to be open to the idea of receiving services from the police department or from social services. And some of you have personal experience with that, have been involved in this in our community, and you're aware that it's not as simple as walking up to an individual and handing them an opportunity to seek shelter or seek some assistance in getting a job. There's a lot more to accomplish there, and a lot of contacts are required to get there. So these numbers reflect a lot of hard work by our community policing team, and I think that they're reflective of a job well done. Next slide, please. This slide reflects our arrest statistics for the year 2020. You'll see that there's been a reduction in bookings. Again, this goes back to the discussion of the jail situation changing due to COVID-19. With the state prisons, kind of being locked down with regard to COVID-19, some of which are also under court order to reduce their numbers due to overcrowding. A lot of state prisoners have been relocated to county jail facilities. And of course, that means those that were in the county jail facilities now have to be released back into the public. So the Sheriff's Department has had a very challenging job and has had a difficult situation trying to keep the jail facilities as available as possible to law enforcement. But they have asked us to issue citations in lieu of custodial arrests in any case where there isn't an immediate danger to the public, because they simply don't have the room to house those individuals and be booked in the process because of the push down from the state level. Next slide, please. I forgot to mention on the last slide, but we'll stay here. Because of the inability to book and because of zero bail, we've actually seen in some cases offenders that are arrested, incited, or even booked and released and reoffend in the same day. In fact, there's a situation that occurred in the city of Glendora in the spring of last year where they arrested the same person for grand theft auto 3 times in a single day. That's because that person was booked and released, went out, reoffended, booked and released, went out, reoffended, and happened one more time. So again, when the pieces of the criminal justice system puzzle do not fit well together, or if one part of that criminal justice system fails, then the entire system is kind of in jeopardy and at risk, and we're forced to deal with the ramifications of that. So while our arrests are up, while our violent crime-related weapons charges are up, we're still seeing an increase in crime, largely because, in my opinion at least, a lot of our offenders are well aware of the fact that they are not being held accountable in the time of COVID-19 and the time of prison population reduction pursuant to court order. And so we're seeing a lot of recidivism and folks that are willing to commit crime with impunity because of a lack of accountability in the criminal justice system. So I want to highlight our community engagement unit in this slide. As you're all aware, Sergeant Echeverria runs our community affairs unit. He's done a fantastic job in attempting to broaden our use of social media. A lot of us in law enforcement aren't the best in terms of understanding social media and utilizing that. So we're striving to do a much better job of community outreach with regard to social media, putting our information out there, being transparent to our community that we serve, and doing our best to utilize these new platforms to engage in with our community. So you'll see some of the statistics here. Our social media viewership has increased over 1,000% in the calendar year 2020, which shows the fact that we're becoming more sophisticated in our use of social media and putting good information out there that people want to see. And our likes and our followership has gone through the roof as well. So it's a testament to the fact that when we put our minds to something and we do a good job of getting ourselves out there, the community is interested, the community wants to be engaged with us, and we want to be engaged with them. And during COVID-19, this was especially important for us to do because we weren't able to do Coffee with a Cop and other in-person town hall meetings. So this was a good alternative for us to continue that community outreach. Next slide, please. Our recruiting has always been a challenge for us. Our goal is to locate, recruit, hire good qualified individuals. And what we're seeing is there's a slight reduction in the number of folks that are interested in a law enforcement career. for a variety of reasons, but we've seen some anti-law enforcement sentiment in the community, which I think dissuades some individuals who would otherwise be interested in joining the ranks of the police department. But nevertheless, we've worked hard to widen our net in terms of identifying and locating quality candidates that will serve the city of San Bernardino well. Despite that, we have had some setbacks in the year 2020. During the initial stages of COVID, we had a hiring pause citywide that kind of stalled our ability to recruit for a time frame. And our police academies, both the Riverside Sheriff's Department and San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, canceled several academies due to COVID-19. So even though we had some individuals ready to go, we simply weren't able to get them the training required before being hired as a police officer. We also saw a greater number of separations in the year 2020. Most of that was routine, regular attrition. A lot of folks were just due to be retired. And so our numbers overall for the year went down slightly from the previous fiscal year. On the positive side, due to some excellent grant writing work, we were able to attain 15 new positions for the police department. That's a huge number. For those of you who aren't aware, a single police officer can cost upwards of $150,000 to $200,000 a year when both pay and benefits are included in the calculation. So by getting grant funding for 15 new positions, the police department has done an excellent job, Captain Hernandez in particular, of securing grant funding to increase our number of available positions for which we are currently recruiting. Our current number of authorized positions at the very bottom right of your screen, as you can see, is 268 at this particular time. Next slide. So our recruitment strategies kind of run the gamut. We have some community recruitment teams. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, Lieutenant Carrington is taking a picture there with one of our local coaches. We work together with colleges in particular to try to recruit individuals that are seeking to improve themselves through higher education, those who are involved in athletic activities and might have a proclivity towards a law enforcement career. We go to military recruitment fairs, and of course we do any type of community event that we can to try to recruit local candidates from our community. Diversity is always a key identifier for us. It's important for us to be reflective of the community that we serve. And I'm proud to report that approximately 70% of our law enforcement recruits in the last 2 years have been Hispanic, which is a great reflection of our community. And in addition to that, 29% of our hires in the last 2 years have all had local connections to the city, whether they were born and raised here, went to school here, have family members here. The concept is that they have a commitment to the city. They have a connection to the outcome of what the police department does for the city. And that results in a harder working officer that really does have a connection to the roots of the city. And so with our recruitment efforts, although again, our primary focus is to get the best candidates possible for our community, we also always engage in strategy to try to recruit to make the department as diverse as possible and try to get local community members to apply for the police department. With that said, our community, our commissioners, our city council members, all of those with a vested stake in our community are our best recruitment teams. And we always encourage them when they have an opportunity and see a candidate that might be a great addition to our police department to put them in contact with our recruitment team and let them know that they found someone that they think would make a good fit. And then we'll take it from there and do our best to process them and identify their suitability for a police officer position. Next slide, please. I talked a little bit about grants earlier. This is a great overview of the grants that the police department received in the year 2020. At the very bottom right corner, you'll see that our grant writing has resulted in an intake of $12.2 million for the city. This is a huge amount, as you all know. We've often faced significant financial challenges in the city, and by bringing in 12 million outside dollars into the city, we've done everything we possibly can do to try to improve our law enforcement efforts and ability in serving this community without putting any drain on the department's general fund. Our Administrative Services Division Captain, Captain Hernandez, and some of his staff are the primary grant writers for us. We have folks throughout the agency that will pick up a grant here and there to do their best and try to bring in more money for the city. But all of this grant writing and all of this grant intake has been the result of police department employees preparing these grant proposals. We do not solicit outside help or professional grant writers for this. So I think this is a superb job by our staff of bringing in this outside funding to support our city. Next slide, please. So this is a slide just talking about our personnel goals. It's our goal to fully staff all of our vacant positions. We always have to fight attrition. Our numbers are being adjusted, whether it be through budget approvals or outside funding through grants. So it's kind of a fluctuating number year over year, but suffice it to say, it is our goal to fill every position possible that improves the ability of the police department to serve the community. It helps our officers reduce the workload, and it's just an overall improvement to our ability to provide law enforcement services. Next slide, please. All right, so that concludes the presentation. As I said, I hope I did it a small amount of justice as compared to our chief. Again, he apologized for not being able to present this to you himself, but I'm happy to answer any questions from our commissioners at this time if I can.
Commissioners, all of you, if you would all unmute your mics, you can all unmute. Let's let each other, if you have any questions or comments, and then just you can jump in here and ask Captain Palace if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, this is Ricardo. I do have a couple of questions, Captain. Would bringing back of our graffiti task force, is that something that might be in the future for us?
So I think that all the possibilities are on the table. We would like to staff all of those former units that we used to have, but we have to prioritize what's most important to the community. Thankfully, our Public Works Department has a graffiti removal task force that is able to respond out and address some of those issues. It's a challenge to provide every position, but at this point, it's not under immediate consideration. But it's something I'm sure the chiefs would certainly consider and keep in mind.
Okay,
So are you saying, Captain, that that's been transferred over to Public Works? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, so we have different roles. Public Works has the ability to go out and cover up some of the graffiti throughout the city and does a very good job at doing that when they're notified that something like that exists. But law enforcement's job is different. We're out there to try to prevent graffiti from occurring in the first place, try to investigate those who commit that crime of vandalism and reduce it by making appropriate arrests. So it's a hand-in-hand partnership. We just have slightly different roles.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Tomba.
Yeah, I do have a second question. Of the $12 million that we have in grants, has that been budgeted already within our budget, or is that in addition to?
Grant funding is certainly something we can't rely upon during the calendar year or the fiscal year. And so many of these grants that were cited on that slide, on slide number 16, were grants that came up during the year. So they were added to the budget after the budget was already approved and adopted by council. So it just depends on the timing. If we get an allocation of grant funding during the budget discussions, let's say in between April and May, that time frame, it might be included as a part of the next year's fiscal planning by our finance department and by our city council. But if that grant award occurs during the calendar year, then it will have to be added to our budget for that year.
So did the general fund budget that we get from City Hall, was it reduced by the amount of the grant?
No.
Okay.
Other questions or comments, commissioners?
This is Commissioner Pete, and I had I think I have about 3 questions. I'm not sure if
Go ahead, sir.
two of them could be answered. If they can't, I understand because it's mostly data specific. On one of the slides, you mentioned that the breakdown on folks that were released early whether they were the victims or the perpetrator, and you mentioned a certain amount. I don't know. I think that was 19, if I remember correctly. What's the breakdown between how many of them were the victims, how many of them were actually the perpetrators? Do you know that offhand?
I'm sorry, I don't. I just had the total number of 19 were either the victim or the suspect.
Okay. And the other one I have was, I think, well, I'm still talking about homicides here, and the folks that were the victims of those homicides. Do you know that, I mean, I'm not sure if this is information you can provide, but what was the age of those individuals? Do you know, like, the majority, were they younger or were they older individuals, or?
You know, with 69 cases, you know, they spread the gamut. As you probably saw, we had one that involved child abuse. A very young child, sadly, was a victim of homicide. We have folks that are involved in domestic violence incidents. They're older. And then we have a lot of ages in between. I don't have the mean or median number available to you. I know from my own practical experience that homicide victims tend to be those, you know, ranging from, 15 to 50, anywhere in there is generally our victim age range. However, with that said, I don't have a specific median or mean to offer you. I'm sorry.
Okay. The other question I have, so I see on the presentation, there's a lot of, you spoke a lot about, like, data driven patrols and being data driven. So my question is, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more for me on that? I mean, I'm familiar with the term, but just as a new commissioner, just trying to get a better understanding of the police department and what do you actually exactly mean by, when you're saying being data driven and proactive and going into vulnerable communities, what does that actually look like?
Sure. So we have a lot of different types of data-driven information. For example, based on our calls for service, we can develop a heat map of times, dates, locations of where crime is more likely to occur. And then we can have officers focus on those areas as a result of those heat maps. We actually track, a lot of information for every arrest we make, for every report we take. So we can see the same individual coming up several times as a suspect in a crime report. And so we can address that individual to the extent that we possibly can. And then, location and crimes of opportunity are always a big issue for us. So with regard to our calls for service, we can kind of map out hotspots in the community where we can see certain types of crime occurring at a higher rate than others. And a lot of this information is actually available to the public by visiting our police department's website. We have a system called Crime View Web Mapping, and you can isolate an area within the city, whether it's your business or your residence and neighborhood. And not only can you see specific crimes that have occurred in that area, but you can see kind of a trend in terms of what type of crimes have been occurring there. Now, we use a very similar system. Our system has a lot more information that we can't publicly disclose, certainly on the Crime View web mapping page. But essentially, it's all about collecting data, whether it be a subject involved in an arrest, what kinds of crimes occur at what times of day, in what locations in the city, and we use all of that data to proactively police. We have, as I mentioned, some overtime officers that will be dispatched out to address some of those areas with a higher propensity for criminal-related activity, to try to suppress that activity and try to prevent that activity to the extent possible. So it includes anything from crime numbers, where we have raw data in terms of numbers produced by our crime analysis unit, to heat maps, and then specific information about specific crimes for which we are looking for a named suspect or a specific vehicle, for example, that might be involved in a crime. And that information is distributed to officers so that they can be more proactive in their policing and police in a more intelligent way using that crime analysis data.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any other comments, questions?
I have a question.
Who is
Kelly,
Commissioner Kelly? Thank you.
I have a question. Does the police department have a online reporting for the citizens of the city? And if you do, Does that alleviate some of the stress of the officers having to go to each and every report call?
Yes, and I appreciate that question. It highlights something we've been trying to educate the public about for some time now. You know, one of the criticisms we receive from time to time is our response times to report calls, because they are a lower priority call. And rather than have somebody wait at home until an officer is available from the higher priority calls, we often refer them to our online reporting system. So you can visit our department's website and navigate to that reporting system. Depending on what kind of crime that you're trying to report, it may or may not be the right place to do it. So for example, if it's a violent crime or a crime that has recently occurred, it might be something that the system rejects in the online format, because it really is important for us to send an officer out to investigate that situation immediately. But let's say, for example, you're on vacation and you return and your storage shed in the backyard was broken into during a burglary and some of your tools were missing. Well, you know, that's not something that happened in the recent past, and that's the type of crime you would easily be able to report online. That would go to one of our detectives in our detective bureau. They would take a look at it and evaluate whether we have enough to conduct an investigation. They might compare it to other reports received in that area to see if it matches the same MO of a suspect. And so we get a lot of the same results from an online report in those types of cases than we would if we sent an officer out to take that report in person. A lot of folks prefer that in-person service, and I certainly understand and respect that, but there is a significant convenience factor of being able to log in 24 hours a day to our online reporting site and being able to report that in your own words, in your own time frame.
Okay, but does that take some of the pressure off the officers having to go to each and every report call, and help the dispatchers for the calls that they're receiving also? Does that help them?
Absolutely. So for every call that is reported in online format, it's one less call an officer has to respond to. So that enables them to focus on in-progress calls, higher priority calls, and get to those calls much faster if they're not stuck on a report call that could have been handled online. So it does reduce the workload for officers. It enables them to have more proactive time to do preventative law enforcement rather than just being responsive to the radio and the 911 calls throughout the day. Our dispatchers and our front desk personnel do a good job of referring folks to an online reporting system when the type of incident that they're reporting is eligible for reporting in that format. And our front desk community service officers are available Monday through Thursday business hours for telephonic reports. We understand that not every member of our community has immediate access to a computer or other mechanism to make an online report. So we can also take those over the telephone using one of our civilian personnel rather than dispatching a police officer to a call that's not in progress, and save them for the higher priority calls.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Yes, Commissioner Jarman, I just have one comment, one question, if I may, for Captain Pellis. How do you account for the big difference between the clearance rate with this department and the national average? I mean, that's an excellent percentage, by the way.
Well, it's a great question. I wish I could give you a precise answer, but I can give you what I believe to be the case. A couple of things. First is the introduction of our Special Investigations Unit. It's a group of officers who is devoted to solving some of these higher violent crime type related situations. You know, they focus a majority of their time and effort receiving information from our investigators in the homicide unit and going out and identifying these individuals, conducting surveillance, writing search warrants, and doing tasks that our heavily burdened homicide unit doesn't always have time to do. So I believe that the introduction of that Special Investigations Unit, which coincided with our department reorganization in mid-2019, has a lot to do with it. In addition to that, you know, we've made some enhancements to our homicide unit. You know, we're trying to be more intelligent in our policing and utilizing the data that we have in different ways. I don't want to get into all of our investigative techniques and tactics, but suffice it to say that our homicide unit is working very, very diligently to solve these cases, utilizing a variety of different technological and investigative resources that may not have not been available in the past. And we're putting all of those pieces of the puzzle together to increase our solvability rate. So there's a variety of factors. We're including a lot of different avenues of approach to try to be as holistic as we possibly can to address these crime issues in our city.
I think it's worthy of commendation.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question. This is Jesse. Captain Pellis, is there a level of violence or a determination for whether a criminal is held, released, booked, or kept? I'm sure at some point somebody's so dangerous we have to take them off the streets. But how does our judicial system work to keep people at bay from victimizing the public at large?
Yeah, so that's the challenge during COVID-19 for sure. It used to be pre-COVID-19, we took everybody to jail that was eligible for booking, and they would be processed and fingerprinted and booked, and that alone was a significant deterrent to some individuals, much less the whole criminal justice process. To answer your question more directly, the Sheriff's Department is in charge of making decisions with regard to who remains in custody, and they do so within the confines of the bail system and within the confines of the Supreme Court's decision regarding COVID-19 handling of cases. So it's not to suggest that everybody is going to be immediately released upon booking. Certainly our most violent offenders, if we arrest somebody for assault with a deadly weapon, homicide, rape, those folks will be jailed just as they were before because they're an immediate danger to society at a very, very high level. But folks that might have been jailed previously for a lower level felony, let's say, for example, a forgery, because it's not a violent crime, it is still a felony, they might be eligible for immediate release after being booked and processed. So I think that is kind of a moving target. The number of beds available in our local jails has a lot to do with it. When the Sheriff's Department has an increase in bookings related to the more violent crimes, and they need space in the jails to accommodate those individuals after accounting for the state prisoner realignment down to county jails, then they have to make some tough decisions as to who to release from custody to make space for those more violent offenders. Our Sheriff's Department has a very, very difficult challenge in these times, not only with COVID, but having to take on the extra caseload from the state prisons, housing those folks locally in our jails. It just reduces the space available for some of those offenders. But it is a moving target. It's a challenging decision, and that's one area where our Sheriff's Department has taken a lot of that responsibility.
Thank you, sir. Any more? All right. Let me just ask you two short abbreviated questions, Captain.
Sure.
First, back to the clearance rate. The clearance rate is at 75%. Is that an improvement for clearance rate for San Bernardino Police?
It is, yes, and I'm sorry I don't have the number for the previous year, but again, with the institution of the Special Investigations Unit and some investigative techniques and technological advancements that we've been able to use in our homicide unit, the two of those going hand in hand in that 2020 calendar year have resulted in an increase.
I actually have that number, and
good.
It was 38%.
Very good.
So that's why I'm so impressed. Secondly, when a person files an online report, then what?
So the online report is sent to one of our detectives or a special investigations officer. And
So somebody does follow up on those online reports. They're not just dropped off into oblivion.
Of course, yes. We review every one. An assessment is made as to whether there's something we can investigate. And if so, it's assigned to an investigator. If not, the case can be aborted or closed. A lot of our reports that we receive are for insurance purposes. I think some members of our community, in the example I gave you with the burglary at the shed, there's no fingerprints, no suspect information, nobody saw anybody coming and going. There's really not much we can go on. But they're filing the report in order to make an insurance claim.
So my question is, does someone at the department respond to those reports? Not necessarily a car drive up, But if somebody called them and said, we have your report and ask your questions, or are there instances where they file a report and they never hear from anybody?
So that should not be the case, but
Yeah.
there can be a wait time. We have proceeded to ask for a lot of reports to be filed on our online system.
Right.
And as a result, because we have so few individuals that are looking through those on a day-to-day basis, there might be a delay before they get a response.
But undoubtedly, they do get a response.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments from other commissioners? All right, great. Thank you, Captain. I realize this is taking a little longer tonight, but again, it's been a year, commissioners, so we're getting caught up. All right. Our next report is County Fire. County Fire Chief Mejia is with us.
Good evening. Wait till the PowerPoint comes up.
I think we have it in front of us, Chief.
Okay.
If you want to
well,
move
this-
ahead, we have it.
Yes, this is an annual report from January 1st all the way to December 31st. Next slide. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Well, I wanted to say we had a change at the top. Chief Dan Muncie is now our fire chief. He used to sit in my seat here, and he oversaw Division 2. He's now the fire chief. And we promoted Deputy Chief Tom Marshall to operations. He was one of our guys that worked up through the ranks, and he was the assistant chief overseeing the South Desert. He's now our Deputy Chief of Operations. And then we hired Chief Petrell Washington. He came out of Pasadena Fire. He's our Deputy Chief of Administration, and he's a good addition. So we've had a change in leadership at the top three in the past year or so. Next slide. I wanted to just do a quick overview of some of the calls that we ran in comparison to 2019. We had a 4.3% increase in call load. And we all know that we had a strange year with COVID and our responses and how that all worked out, but we did see. But some of the things I wanted to highlight is our structure fires continue to go up, as well as our vegetation fires and vehicle fires. And then you'll see a large increase in our other fires. Those are anything from an illegal burn, something like setting a trash can on fire, to smoke in the wash where we have a homeless encampment and those types of things. But we did see an increase in our structure fires, and we think it's due to a lot of the abandoned buildings that are occupied, and it's kept us very busy. Also, our medical aids, they were up about 663. Not a huge increase, seeing that we had all the COVID related incidents, but it was an increase. Next slide. I want to talk about some of the capital improvement projects that we're working on in Division 2 here in San Bernardino that affects San Bernardino. So Station 226 and Station 227, those are both scheduled to be rebuilt. 226 is the station on Del Rosa, south of Highland, and 227 is the one at 40th and Electric. And we're presently in the process now of doing the design. We're also sent letters of intent to purchase property in close proximity to those stations. So you won't see a change in response times or any of that. The only change you might see is if we have to do a design and build, is where we're going to actually build on the site that we're presently occupying. We'd probably have to relocate those firefighters for about a year when we go through that process. But we won't know until probably midsummer if that's going to be the case. We're hoping to purchase property and be able to do that and make it seamless. Next slide. We're also got a very aggressive vehicle replacement plan here for the city. This year, we've already accepted 2 Type 1 engines. Those are the typical fire engines that you see running around your city. And we've already received one of the 2 trucks that we're getting this year. The other truck will be coming in October-ish. And I say October-ish because COVID has really kind of messed with some of these timelines and getting these vehicles in. So we'll have those units in service in about a couple of months, at least the Type 1 engines and the truck. The other one will take probably after the first of the year. One of the things that we wanted to highlight was next year we have plans to purchase 2 more Type 1 engines for the city. And after that, we have replaced all the first line pieces of equipment in San Marino City within 6 years of annexation. Next slide. I want to talk about our special ops division. They handle the hiring for us and recruitment. Staffing is an issue for us. We have quite a few openings. And like PD, we have some people that through attrition are just are timing out. And so this year, or in 2020, we graduated 27 recruits from our tower. They've been on the floor for 6 months. They're still in their probationary period. It's a 1-year period. But we're actively trying to hire 30 right now with a academy date of August. And also we're recruiting for lateral firefighters right now as well. And we realize that this isn't going to meet our demands to fill our ranks. And we're planning on a January academy as well. So we'll be running back-to-back academies to try to fill up some of those positions. And just like in PD, it's important that we fill those positions because what happens is we have constant staffing, which means if somebody's not sitting in a seat that we have to fill it. So a lot of these guys are working a lot of extra days, and we're seeing it's really kind of affecting their work life balance at home. So it's important that we try to fill these as quickly as we can, but we're also having some issues with trying to get people recruited to fill those ranks. Next slide. Some of the points of interest I just wanted to talk about. We had Measure U, which was the FP5 measure that was the fire tax that it passed. But unfortunately, the group that was opposing it, which was the Red Brennan group that brought it, they're already telling us that they're going to bring it back in 2022. So we have some work to do to continue to educate the public on the value of that. That's worth about $25 million to the fire department in maintaining that ballot measure. Also, we also are going after grants. We have in-house grant writers as well. One of them is a SAFER grant for 12 personnel. We hope to hear back on that in October. If we're successful in that, we're planning on County Fire overall adding 4 engine companies with those additional personnel. And the San Marino City will see 1 engine company put into place. Also, radios. Radios are not cheap. They're about $8,000 a radio, and we need roughly another 160. We've already purchased 160, so it adds up quickly. So we're hoping another grant will be able to fill that gap for us. One of the other things we do out of our special ops is our community risk reduction. Well, that's a key word for Chief Muncie, and his slogan is that if it's predictable, it's preventable. And one of the things that we look at is all these vegetation fires that we have on Little Mountain, Paris Hill, even in some of the foothills. And so we're looking at ways to reduce that fuel load and try to be out in front of this. And if you notice last year, we brought in goats and we put them on Little Mountain, and we're hoping to get a grant to be able to do that because it's an expensive endeavor. I mean, we funded it last year, but to make it an ongoing thing, we need to kind of get some grants and to help take care of that. Next slide. And then on the goats, just speaking about the goats, it was a new venture for us. We've always heard, what about goats? Well, so we were able to get some goats, and we had anywhere between 150 and 300. And really, the number of goats is based on how much acreage you're trying to clear and the amount of time. So there's all kinds of logistical issues with goats. You know, you got to make sure that they're watered, they're fenced in, and they can't just eat the vegetation. They have to have the supplemental diets. So that's not as easy as just bringing in a bunch of goats and getting it taken care of. But we were pleasantly surprised with the outcome. They covered 48 acres. They protected directly 100 homes there on Little Mountain. And it was an 11-week process, and the cost was about $30,000. What we'd like to do is really expand that program and take it to the front country and continue to use them in those areas. So we're hoping we'll be able to seek or get some grant money to be able to take care of that. That's really the end of my presentation. Like I said, I didn't do anything on response times. We did have we held steady at 7.5 minute average for 90% of the calls on our response times. I think the highlight for us was we did see an uptick in responses here in the city. I will tell you that San Mateo City is one of the busiest divisions. It is the busiest division in county fire force. As you can see, we average about 38,000 calls for service with 8 stations, and these stations are busy all the time. That's the end of my report. If you guys have any questions.
Can I ask you one question? I'll ask everybody else to unmute your mics, and we'll just jump in if you have any questions or comment. I do have one question to ask you, sir. On your medical response, 27,934 for the year. Yeah, can you explain to me why a fire engine has to, my term, not yours, chase an ambulance all over town? Many times I'll see a fire engine roll up to a scene and then just turn their lights off and turn around and go back to the station because there's no reason for them to be there.
Well, unfortunately, AMR provides a service here in the city, and we don't control how many ambulances they have on the street. And ours is really about calls for service and response times. So our goal is to try to get to 90% of the calls in 7.5 minutes. If we knew that AMR could do that and meet that goal, we wouldn't have to go. But unfortunately, we can't. And so we go with anticipation providing the quickest service to most of the citizens of San Bernardino.
So you go and AMR is the contractor for transport.
And they provide ALS service as well. But like I said, we can control our units and our response times and making sure that we're able to meet those. We unfortunately, especially COVID really kind of highlighted this. AMR was tied up at the hospitals with all these COVID patients. Okay. So their response times really fell off. And so our fire engines were required to go and provide that initial care.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
This is Ricardo. I have a question. At the fire station at 40th and Electric, were you planning on just bulldozing the building down and starting from scratch?
Well, if we do a build on site, yes.
Because I know I took a tour of that station back when I was a fire commissioner, and I was told that building is one of the oldest firehouses here in San Bernardino and has a lot of historical significance. Yes, there are a lot of problems with the drainage and all kinds of things like that, but I know I personally would like to see the main structure stay just because of its historical significance. But my 2 cents worth, and I don't want to prevent the building from going up if we really need it, but I know that there is a lot of significance with the historical of the history of the building.
Susie, can you take down the presentation, please? Other commissioners, comments or presentations? I'm sorry, comments or questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who?
Me, Kelly.
Commissioner Kelly.
Sorry. Reference the goats. I know you do have to get a grant to get some more goats to do the areas. Where does Paris Hill lie on the list of possibly having goats come take care of Paris Hill for us?
And that's where we're hoping to expand it this coming summer or this spring. Yes, and it's high on there because it's one of those places that burns every year for us. So we'd like to get in there and clear a lot of that vegetation, and that's a perfect way.
Okay. And I have one more question. I know it's early for fireworks, but are you guys going to do a public, public
announcement
or education of fireworks this year?
Yes, we do every year. We post something up and we talk about that. It's always a hot topic here in the city on fireworks and the ordinance and stuff. But yes.
Okay, thank you. That was my questions.
And I have a question. This is Jesse Carrillo. I like your title of predictable, preventable. I live kind of close to the foothills of San Bernardino, and the Blair fire got pretty close to us. Do you do anything in terms of prevention when it comes to transient encampments? I was privy to a little bit of information. I had a police or a news reporter out. Her husband was on a committee in Riverside, and they had said that somewhere in the area of 50% of the fires that were caused by transients. So I don't know if that, bleeds over into the police stuff, but what are the protocols and the procedures and the precautions that your department does to protect the public?
Well, I will tell you that we do partner with PD with a SWAT medic program, but to take it in Fontana, we also have a firefighter that's assigned to their PD that goes out and makes contact with the homeless and engages as well, like their officers in San Bernardino. We just don't have that program here, but they go out and they engage and they have a better feel for that. And we agree. It's one of those things that is an issue, but we typically don't go out and make that initial contact because it can be a dangerous situation.
So a follow-up to that would be, let's say that we discover a transient encampment in a precarious place in respect to fire danger. Do we reach out to police or do we reach out to you? Is there a difference?
Well, you could bring it to our attention. We have our prevention officers that are continuing to look at those things to try to prevent fires. They could go out and take a look at it. But typically, I think that we would probably try to partner with PD and take a look at it as a whole.
Could we get Captain Pellis to maybe chime in on that?
That'd be great.
Sure. So I do think that your first point of contact, unless it's actually there's a fire, should probably be the police department. We're probably aware of the encampment, and sometimes there's an ability for us to address it immediately. Other times we have to work through Caltrans. A lot of our hillside properties are actually Caltrans responsibilities, especially along the freeway right of way. And so we have to involve them and sometimes CHP to address those. But those that are squarely within the city, our district resource officers can make it a point to go out and address those, especially if there's a fire hazard that hasn't started yet. But by all means, if there's an active fire, obviously fire department's the way to go. But the goal is to prevent that. And although we haven't seen a lot of encampment fires turn into a problem for us in our community, thankfully, we have seen a lot of squatters in buildings start fires, whether it be for cooking or heating purposes that have resulted in structure fires for the fire department. So those are a high priority for our officers when we get those calls of squatters being involved in vacant buildings.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cervantes?
Yes.
There you go. I thought you had a question, ma'am.
No, I didn't. I'm just like,
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on the homeless situation.
Hold on, sir. Commissioner Peden?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to follow up on the conversation. I think it was the first question regarding the fire trucks and then as well as AMR. And you mentioned something about it not being kind of coordinated. So I'm wondering, is there a cost that the public in the city is paying because we have multiple people going to a call for service where they probably shouldn't be there? And is there a way that we can become more efficient in that regard to save taxpayers' dollars?
I agree with that.
So what we did is we try not to go to the Alpha and Bravo calls, which are the low acuity calls. Like if you get a call for leg pain, obviously it doesn't need a 911 response, and it can be handled with AMR. And that's typically like how we try to reduce our rolling stock from going out and getting mileage or wear and tear on their vehicles. But with COVID, it was an interesting thing because ambulance became the premium, right? People that needed to be truly transported were taking up all the ambulances, and there wasn't enough ambulances to go around in the county. So County ISMA actually came to fire departments and said, you need to be the point of contact. So fire departments would roll out, even on the leg pains, and we would determine if they needed an ambulance or not. And we would try to refer them over to urgent cares or other means, or try to convince them to go by private vehicle. So we saw a kind of a switch with COVID and how they looked at it, because ambulances were the premium. We since have gone back to fire departments aren't running on the low acuity calls, and AMR is handling those. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot that comes out of COVID that's going to teach us some things, and maybe how we respond to 911 calls and the most appropriate way. But I agree.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Tomba?
Yeah, I had a follow-up question on the recording of the homeless fires. When I spoke to you on the 4th of July, I asked if we recorded arson fires that were started by pyrotechnics, and you said that the fire department had no means of doing that, so there was no accurate number of how many fires were started because of fireworks. Well, this question is something similar. Do we have a number as to how many fires were started by homeless situations, by homeless encampments and people living in houses?
No. And the reason why is because you got to remember how data is collected, right? So if it's in a checkbox, and then you could pull down those check boxes that say it was a homeless situation or something like that, or it's easier to grab that data. Most of those notes are put in the narrative. So there's really no way for us to, and then we don't always know the status of people, if they were truly homeless or if they were disgruntled or just squatters or what. I don't know. So it's kind of difficult for us to kind of get that kind of data, other than we just say if the building was occupied or unoccupied at the start of the fire.
Well, I'm going to have to say that this is really important information. It's costing the city thousands of dollars, or the citizens anyway. This is important information that we need to gather. And if you need to create a box, I think you should create a box and not just talk about it. So as a citizen, as a commissioner, I would request that we start specifically documenting data, not only for the fireworks, but for homeless. We need that information to make decisions. The council people need that information to make decisions. And I think that's part of the money that we're paying you to have these services. We need that information.
Can I ask a question, Commissioner Tombak, of you?
Yes.
If fire is not most often not the initial contact, we've just been told by Captain Palace that their preference is contact, that they go and secure the scene, and then they call in fire. I'm just questioning from an analytical point of view, how would fire know if it was homeless, or, I mean, I don't know.
Well, they do have arson investigators. Once a fire starts is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about how many people are in buildings now that could potentially start fires. I'm talking about how many fires were actually caused last year by homeless, and what are the financial statistics behind that.
I see.
So, and that's something, a simple investigation. You see maybe a backpack or something that's there. I mean, it doesn't take much to tell whether it's a arson fire started by homeless or not.
Thank you. I just wanted that clarity. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to make a follow-up to Richard's point. I agree. That is something that, for the city is so expensive. When you look at the Blair situation, the Blair Park or the Blair Mountain fire, several houses went up in flames. In fact, I think one of our council members' homes were affected.
Right.
With that kind of expense, the data, I think, back to even going back to Captain Pellis, I think that's just such a smart way to look to protect us, is to get the analytics. And if we don't have the raw data, we don't have the analytics. And I don't know, I agree with Richard. I think that there needs to be some investigation into how can we gather that information, not to make more work for people, but to safeguard that maybe a little prevention can save a lot of money for the city of San Bernardino and actually increase the safety factor for us.
Okay, I think what the right thing to do is to when we come to the end of the agenda, if we want to either send items out to one of the subcommittees or bring it back as an action item to ask for it to be done. We just add it as an agenda item for an upcoming meeting, or we send it out to subcommittees for some sort of an assessment. But your comments are well taken. Okay.
A real quick question. I'd like to have a copy of the report, if that's possible.
The report was included in the backup.
Okay.
All reports were included in the backup.
And just one little comment, if we could add the financial impact as some of the data, maybe in that motion in the future.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. That's a little later.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Mejia. Thank you very much, sir. We move on to Public Works and our director there, Ms. Jensen.
Good evening, all. Commissioner Elliott, good to see you again. I didn't get to kind of chime in and say hello.
Good to be seen and not viewed.
Yes. So we have a quick report for you to give you kind of our year in review of 2020. Mr. Alex Kishta, our Deputy Director of Public Works, our city engineer, is here as well. So we will just kind of dive in, if that's okay. If we can go to the first slide, Susie.
Emphasis on the word quick.
Yes, gotcha. So while this is catching up, what I wanted to do, the first few slides, Public Works, I think everybody, when you hear Public Works, you kind of have your own idea of what that is, whether it's engineering and capital projects, or it's a guy in the park. But there are a lot of divisions that go into supporting the work that is done in Public Works. And we really see ourselves, as we do partner with fire and we do partner with PD, as really being kind of an integral part of the safety, maybe at a different level, but for this great city of ours. So in Public Works, just to give you some idea, we have an administration division, which obviously I'm in, overseeing budget. We look at staffing and do policy development. We also have an environmental division, which is a division of staff that help oversee our franchise agreement with Burtech for our refuse and recycling services here, and our street sweeping, and also has regulatory compliance. Our NPDES, which is our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. It's our stormwater compliance, and that compliance is work that has to be done not only on projects that the city does themselves, but also kind of is evaluating and inspecting when developers come in. Engineering, obviously, is one of our big departments. Alex and his team oversee the capital improvement projects that you see coming through, whether it's pavement projects or replacement of playground equipment, or building rehabs. He also's got the land development division, which was recently, July 1st of 2020, was actually transitioned from the community development department down here into our Public Works engineering team. And we made that change so that we could kind of expedite our plan check and really make sure that we had good communication happening. between on-site and off-site work. We also have a traffic engineering division, and actually Assam Jabshay is here on the commission as well with us tonight as part of engineering. Next slide. Then we have our operations and maintenance, which is, again, another very busy division in this city of almost 63 square miles. Our operations and maintenance division is the one that is out potholing in the streets. They're maintaining our storm drains and our traffic signals and our street lights. They also oversee contract maintenance, as well as staff that work in our landscape maintenance districts, on our medians and in our parks. Our urban forestry program, so for our tree trimming, is in that division as well. And as you may well be aware, we've got a couple of cemeteries that we manage there too. And so kind of wrapping up the divisions, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking so fast, we also have our facilities and fleet, and these divisions are actually kind of internal service divisions. So our facilities divisions handle our building maintenance. We've got over 36 buildings, but we actually have about over 180 structures. So if you count things like gazebos and whatnot in parks, these things are maintained by this division. They also provide custodial services. They handle the processing of all of our utilities, whether it's our water and electric for all of our facilities, and partner often with Alex and his team in project management, particularly when we're doing rehabs on some of our community centers or our buildings here. And then our fleet division obviously is responsible for making sure that everybody continues to have an operational and rolling vehicle. This is really important for the police department, who is one of our biggest customers, and then as well as for our operations department with the heavy equipment that they use. They assist in purchasing new vehicles, establishing specifications for that, and handle the vehicle registration for the city. So next slide. So I'm not going to take you through every single number, but I did want to at least provide some stats for you in terms of the types of requests for service that have been closed by this is our operations and maintenance division. As you can see, the number of items closed last year was almost 10,600. The graffiti team that you spoke of earlier is actually right now a two-man crew who gets a little help from some of our other maintenance workers as needed. And so you can see the great number of graffiti abatement moments that they had there. Over 4,000 in a year for two guys is pretty impressive. A lot of potholes filled, trees trimmed. We also had quite a few of our street lights that we were able to repair. Lots of times the work that needs to be done on these assets is bigger than what can just kind of be done by our ops teams, and that's when we kind of roll these things into CIP projects. But everything that you're seeing here are really kind of the one-off requests that have come through to the operations and maintenance team. So really proud of them. They've really pulled together and are doing a great job. Next slide. Again, our fleet and facilities teams. Facilities, as you can imagine, gets called when the lights don't work, when it's too hot, it's too cold, when plumbing isn't working, if we have issues with vandalism at our facilities and they've got to, address boarding up a window. They really have kind of a broad range of things that they respond to. And in addition to that, they're also helping us often do improvements to our facilities, particularly with COVID and having to not only move people around for spacing, but installing new shields and things like that we had to put in place so that we made sure that we were complying with social distancing and handling all of that. And then our fleet team, you can see a couple of the pieces of equipment there that they have had their hands on, just 2 of many hundred. But they've been very, very busy as well. And we've been really trying to work hard to get not only the fleet team, but our operations team and all of our staff the tools that they need. So if we go to the next slide, one of the kind of big wins for us this year was we finally received the Vactor truck that we had ordered. These vehicles can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to show up. Takes a while for them to be manufactured. This particular picture that you're looking at is some training on our new Vactor, and that Vactor truck is a vehicle that is used actually to maintain our storm drains. So they're able to kind of what they call jet, kind of the junk that's in the catch basins and the storm drains or pipes, and then essentially vacuum it out. So this was really a big win. The Vactor that we had before, which we still have, kind of uses backup, was just having some challenges mechanically, and so this was really a good way for us to get some efficiencies going in our storm drain department. That was one of our big pieces of equipment we got last year. And then next slide, Susie, please. And then the other that we recently took possession of was a new wheel loader, and this is definitely something that, particularly for our team in the streets, our team that are out there helping to clean up the right of way, dealing maybe sometimes with homeless encampment leftovers and things like that. This vehicle really makes moving big piles of debris a lot easier than either having to do it with smaller equipment or even in some cases having to do it by hand. So we're excited to have these pieces of equipment. And next slide. So at this point, I am actually going to turn it over to Mr. Alex Kishta and let him kind of share with you some of the great work that he and his team have done over the last year.
Good evening, commissioners. Again, Alex Kishta, the city engineer for the city of San Bernardino. Under engineering, we have a variety of projects that we are delivering for the city of San Bernardino, including pavement, including replacement of concrete, replacement of playground equipment, new roofs and new building. So for the last year, just for the 2020, the engineering division of the Public Works delivered about 1.4 million square foot of asphalt pavement throughout the city. This is the kind of pavement that we grind about 2 inches and replace them with asphalt. And we did about 900,000 square foot of Cape Seal and about 500,000 square foot of Slurry Seal. And with that being said, along with the pavement rehab, we do some concrete repair. We have about 3,700 linear foot of curb and gutter replaced last year. And we also have about 220 square foot of sidewalk replaced next year. We are looking forward to this year and next year because we will be preparing our CIP and we'll be asking for more money to do more work of that in that nature. I just wanted to bring your attention that there is a little bit the mistake in the numbers of the stop signs. The new locations is 3 locations that we did install stop signs on, and that is the locations are 44th Street and 41st Street, and then Spruce Street, Chestnut, and then Roberts Avenue and Vine. And these are request from residents that the city received. That is, and staff went and evaluate and we went to the council. Unfortunately, we usually come to the committee before we go to the council, but because of the COVID and because of the issues, we did not come to the committee for this one. We went to the council, and that has been, installed. Also, from requests from the PD that we received, we have a no stopping locations that we installed no stopping signs anytime. And that is, if you guys want, if you really need to know, it's Johnston, and I believe that the commissioner is aware of this one. Johnston, still between Mount Vernon and Broadwell, Highland Avenue, Eucalyptus to Rockford, Eucalyptus Avenue, Highland Avenue to 23rd, Wall Avenue between Baseline and Orange Street, and Aries Lane between Aries Lane and 59th Street. So if you look through the page, the paper, the pictures, if you go to the next slide, please. This is one of the projects that was done, and I believe was essential for the city, is Little Mountain between 30th and Kendall, where we did the pavement rehab on that project. Also, if you look, this is a sample of what we did. We did about 6 parks last year for equipment replacement, and this is a sample of Harrison Canyon Park and Allegheny Park. And if you go to the next slide, please. That you see that is Victoria Street rehab project that we completed, and then Arrowhead between 7th and 9th. Also, if you look to the, my right, your left, I believe, that is the Baton Basin. Baton Basin storm drain was very bad, and it was almost undermined Victoria Avenue, which is the main entrance to the San Manuel Casino. So we took the project, we took control of the project, trying to prevent that from happening, from more deterioration happening because of the broken pipe. That if you see in the picture, there's a broken pipe, and then the other picture to my right will be the end result, that you don't see the pipe, but you see the disparator, or where the water comes out to the basin. That was a very essential project, and that was completed. And if you go to the next slide, please, you got 8th Street between Medical Center Drive and Mount Vernon. And we did a few parking lots as a result of council require, we did Lyle Creek, and the other one is, I believe, Rudy Hernandez parking lot, and we are in the process of doing more parking lots at this point of time. With that being said, that is conclude our presentation, and Chris and myself are available for answer any question you might have.
Thank you so much, Alex. All right, commissioners, unmute your mics. Any questions or comments? Only have one question of you, Chris, myself.
Sure.
Do you have are you tracking a response time to CRMs for the citizens?
So I know that that's information that we can pull based on the fact that, when they're requested and when they're closed out. It's not information that I have with me right now.
I understand, but we do have it.
But yes, we have the capacity to do that, and it is something that that we've been talking about looking at more closely. So
yeah, I'm thinking if we ought to start reporting response time on CRMs, just so the citizens get some sort of an idea that similar to I mentioned it before on another department, that it's just not left out in oblivion. Nobody knows anything. So just my thought. But anyway, questions, comments, commissioners?
Commissioner Peden, I have a question.
Commissioner Peden?
Yeah, this is just regarding the fleets. I'm more of a kind of interested in this topic in terms of zero emission fleets. Is there talk, or is there movement in the city or Public Works to start building out a plan to convert the fleet to, as some of them age out, to zero emission fleet?
So we, depending on the types of vehicles that you're talking about, we are looking at electric vehicles coming up in the future. One of the things that we always do is when we replace like our heavy equipment, which is a little bit tougher, right, to get zero emission out of, we do always make sure that we are at like a tier 4 diesel, or the cleanest engines that we can get on those heavier duty equipment. But in terms of the passenger vehicles and whatnot, that's actually something that as we go into the next couple of years, that yes, we are looking at. And I know that we've got some grants that are supported through AQMD that I know that Alex has been working on with some of his team in terms of getting some electric vehicle charging stations in place for ourselves and the public. So definitely on the horizon. I think that, we've had a lot of years of needing to get by with what we had, right? And my old comment is that many of our vehicles are old enough to vote. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're definitely looking at doing it a way that is good for the community, good for the environment, and good for the city. So
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question, if I may.
Commissioner Jarman?
This is in regards to who is responsible for the repair of the sidewalk in front of their residence, their home, if it's on. Is the citizen responsible for that repair? If they is the homeowner responsible for the repair of the sidewalk in front of the
sidewalk repair. So what I would say is this. Our municipal code does place responsibility for the maintenance of portions of the parkway on the resident. However, sidewalk issues normally, if you report them to us, we're going to come out and take a look at them. And if there's, obviously if there's something hazardous, we're going to address it. Speaking of your timelines, Commissioner Elliott, about response to those requests, those sidewalk repair requests are probably the ones that have the lengthiest response time. But what I would suggest, Commissioner Jarman, is that if there is a question or if somebody has a sidewalk issue, that they report it. Let us come out and take a look at it. For the most part, in terms of sidewalk, we are making the repairs when possible, and it's clearly ours. The reason I kind of am leaving a little gray area is because we get calls for things that aren't necessarily sidewalk, that people think are sidewalk. So I think that if you just give us the opportunity to come take a look, for the most part, you're going to find that true sidewalks in the city right-of-way are something that the city are going to address for you.
Okay, thank you. Now, is the same true with the curb?
Curb is definitely ours, yes.
Okay. And the trees, the trees in the parkway.
Trees are actually, again, it depends on the area that you're talking about. So we have landscape maintenance districts that are established in developments where, and community facility districts now, actually, depending on the area we're talking about. The trees that are in the parkway that are directly in front of a home are actually, per our municipal code, the responsibility of the homeowner. I know that is probably goes against everything anyone's ever thought. It's actually something that you find in most cities, is that the parkway, including the tree maintenance, really falls on the homeowner. Again, we work really hard to educate people. Obviously, if we have a hazardous situation, we address things. But if there's ever a question about whether or not the city is going to provide maintenance or a homeowner needs to provide maintenance, all you got to do is give us a call and give us an opportunity to come out and take a look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a comment.
All right, Commissioner Kelly.
Okay. I always like to tell you, Public Works, thank you. I was here during COVID in my residence, and I noticed that they had repaved the street on Crestview between 21st and Gilbert and fixed some of the sidewalks. And I wanted to say thank you. It looks really nice. It's a nice deal that you guys did.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Jensen. and Alex. Thank you all very much. All right. We're back to PD. We move on to Lieutenant Correll. This is an issue that we brought up regarding street vending and the illegal dispensaries in our city. Lieutenant Correll is joining us somewhere. There she is. Welcome, ma'am.
So as introduced, I am Lieutenant Correll. I'm the Northern District Commander, but part of my external duties outside of that is to basically monitor some of the progress and how we're doing with our ACP process, administrative civil penalties forms regarding marijuana enforcement, also following the actual issuance of those ACPs through hearing and just monitoring how many illegal establishments we have throughout the city. So that has been my duty since the 5 districts were created and the community policing model was established. So the way that it was previously working was that basically every area commander was responsible for the amount of illegal dispensaries that they had within their district. And our district resource officers would go out and conduct enforcement at each location. And then once the Measure O cannabis tax ordinance had come into place through Municipal Code 5.18, we were able to establish a full-time marijuana team. That team I am responsible for at this point. At some point, it will transition over to Mike Huntley over in community development. So there are currently 34 illegal dispensaries in our city. That number fluctuates and has over the last year and a half. It ranges all the way upwards towards 55, and like I said, currently in the mid 30s. We do take these complaints that we get from citizens very seriously regarding the illegal establishments. We understand that there is a plethora of violent crime that is sometimes associated with these locations. The complaints come from either direct contact to the area commanders through the CRM or the GO request application or through our council members. So we are able to establish a partnership with the Bureau of Cannabis Control, the BCC, as well as the tax board, otherwise known as the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. We've been successful in serving various types of warrants at these locations, as well as the administrative processes that I spoke about earlier. We currently established the marijuana enforcement team, as I mentioned, through the Measure O taxes, which that is 1 full-time police officer, 1 full-time code enforcement officer, 1 full-time clerical support for the code enforcement office, as well as 1 part-time building inspector. The process is basically once the police officers are able to establish that it is an illegal marijuana dispensary, we go in and we serve a cease and desist letter, and then we eventually serve the administrative civil penalties form. With the decriminalization of marijuana, we do not have the support from the district attorney's office to serve criminal search warrants in most circumstances. So we do rely heavily upon the administrative processes that we have established through our municipal code and through the city in order to enforce these efforts. Beyond that, once we are able to go to a hearing and there's a judgment established against the location, we rely heavily upon our code enforcement partners in order to help us, as well as the building inspectors coming into the locations, taking a look to see what type of violations they have. And oftentimes, they have significant repairs or, changes that need to be done to these buildings because there are illegal modifications made. So as of January of 2021, the marijuana enforcement team was officially established. It does take some time to get the code enforcement officers, as well as the building inspector and the civilian staff trained and hired and in place. So we are still a work in progress, and the team is meeting, I would say, a few times a week in order to, just establish a priority list, and that's based on call response and as well as a threat to the community and, to the neighborhood. So there have been some challenges, through that administrative process. Once a judgment is held against the actual business itself, it doesn't mean that we can go in and close the business. It just means that there is a monetary amount that is due. And, the city is establishing the fact that they do also agree that the establishment is illegally operating without the permits and proper zoning. Once we have gone to that process, our hands are a bit tied on the police side. So, I understand that a lot of our residents are quite frustrated with the amount of time that it takes to enforce and regulate these locations. But, because we do have the decriminalization of marijuana and we do have Measure O allowing marijuana dispensaries in our city, this becomes a little bit of an administrative nightmare when it comes to also regulating those and shutting down the illegal dispensaries. Do I have any questions so far?
This is Pete. Go ahead. Yeah. My question regarding illegal dispensaries is you're mentioning a lot about like administrative, practitioners getting involved in this. What role does the developer or the individual, the landlord, I guess, lack of a better word, the landlord of the retail establishment play in this of allowing these leases to be given to businesses that are illegally doing that business?
That's a great question. Thank you. So when the police department is doing their initial investigation on the actual location to establish the fact that it is an illegal dispensary, we do try to establish who the business owner is, and then also we run a property profile to find out who the property owner is. If we're able to find out, who the business owner is, we will write an ACP to that person or to that LLC. But we do focus on the property owner because we do understand that they are mostly responsible for allowing that lease to go through and to allowing, that type of operation on their property itself.
So, Lieutenant, I actually am quite familiar with this ordinance. And one particular area that bothers me is 9.93020 section E Edward. And it says, quote, administrative civil penalties for violations of any provision of the municipal code shall be assessed at a rate up to $1,000 violation per day. However, if applicable, the administrating hearing officer may reduce the fine in his or her upon a finding of good cause pursuant to a criteria listed section 9.93040 of this chapter. Here's the part I'm after. The maximum amount of this administrative civil penalties shall not exceed $100,000 per parcel or structure for any related series of violations.
Correct.
So what's bothering me here is that, so we're not talking about a mom and pop's dollar store. We're talking about major money here. And so this says that I get it. The DA is not going to take any of your criminal cases, so it's nonsensical to go out there. Okay. But now we do have ACPs that can be levied, as Commissioner Peter was talking about, against the business owners and the landowner, the property owner. This says, or appears to say, that at best, 100 days of $1,000 fines, that we are capped at $100,000 worth of ACPs into perpetuity. That's what I'm reading.
And that is correct. That is what we're faced with at this point. There have been discussions with our city attorney as specifically to change that as it relates to illegal dispensaries. We do find that some of these dispensaries can make up upwards towards $15,000 plus per day. Right. And that's a significant amount of money that the city sees no taxation on, it sees no benefit on, and so, we do understand that, the $100,000 fine is a problem, and we would like to address that. That's something we've discussed, and it needs to be a case-by-case basis, obviously, and we need to be able to negotiate that, but it would be, I think, beneficial for the city and the community itself to be able to change that amount to where it would be more of a financial impact on these dispensaries. I have had illegal dispensary owners tell me that they would happily pay our $1,000 a day fine and just continue to operate without any sort of harassment from the police. So, it is a problem.
So it's, and what the specific line that bothers me is $100,000 per parcel or structure for any related series of violations. That bothers me. I'm gonna tell you very honest. That bothers me. I mean, okay, we get it. I don't want to beat that horse in the public, but the DA is not going to do anything. Let me ask you this, if you know, are you seeing, or have you seen? I don't know if it was in the crime stats. I don't remember, but is there an uptick of criminal activity and the requirement of officers and time and resources to deal with these illegal dispensaries?
So we have,
maybe it's crime around it, or I don't know, associated to it.
I don't know about I can't speak as far as an actual uptick. I can tell you that we do have a significant amount of violent crime associated with these dispensaries. I would have to go back and try to see if I could, actually track that with our crime stats. But, I can tell you that I know of numerous robberies associated with. We've had several shootings. We've had a couple of murders just in this last year alone at these illegal dispensaries. They cause a significant fear factor for residents that live in and around these neighborhoods that these dispensaries operate out of. And it just brings a totally different type of clientele than what actually is patronizing the illegal dispensaries. So it definitely is a significant problem in our community. It's something that we do take very serious, and we would like to try to be very effective in closing these illegal dispensaries.
I did look back to the report given by Captain Pellis and saw that 6 homicides occurred related to illegal dispensaries last year. But I was just wondering about that. I mean, there are neighbors who live there, in many cases, neighbors who live around there in their home.
Yes.
And I wonder how late all this traffic goes on. I mean, I've seen it. I'm just okay. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you get where I'm. Yeah. Any questions or comments by other commissioners?
I have one more, just real brief
Commissioner
question
Beaton?
on
Yes, sir.
just on this topic before we move on.
Yes, sir.
Is understanding like the root causes of some of the reasons why someone might go into illegal dispensary type business, kind of the underground market of selling cannabis. Are we seeing that some of these folks are there anybody that in our city that are participating in illegal cannabis dispensary that are doing it because they don't have access to actually get a legal permit? So they're forced into that market. And have we looked at that to see maybe there's some of these folks that we can, if there's a possible way that we can get them into the path of making it legal, so they do all the permitting and everything like that, where it's safe for the community, and not just boxing them out. I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts on that.
So in September of 2020, the council and mayor did approve 17 retail locations, and that's based on a percentage of population. And, so if you add that 17 into the roughly 34 that we already have that's illegal, I would, and this is just going to be my opinion, I think that is a sufficient a sufficient number for a city our size. I do know of one person who happened to be running an illegal dispensary who later applied for a legal permit. However, according to the permit process, you cannot be involved in any sort of illegal dispensary or marijuana related activity in order to qualify for the permit. So it's, really incumbent upon the managers or the owners of these potential dispensaries to keep themselves clean. And that's what we're looking for in the city, is to have, very viable, honest business owners come in and try to run a legitimate business, and not, something that does draw murders and robberies to our, neighborhoods. And you really have to take into effect and in consideration the types of locations that these illegal dispensaries are at. It's at old or abandoned churches, which are going to be surrounded by preschools and kindergartens and, really established neighborhoods that can't handle the amount of ingress, egress, or the illegal activity that it draws. So, it's really important for our legal dispensary owners to stay clean and to comply with our municipal codes.
The other side, the other side of this report had to do with street vending. I believe I'm right when I say the city has 8 street vending permits and probably 180 street vendors. So I know that we were going to get a report from you all about street vending, and I think Captain Pellis was jumping in on that one.
He is. Captain Pellis is going to cover that portion of it.
Captain,
Yeah,
sir?
I promised to make it quicker than my earlier report to kind of get this expedited. So in January of 2019, the state of California essentially decriminalized sidewalk vending throughout the state. Subsequent to that, the city adopted an ordinance in June of 2019 to regulate legal street vending, which essentially requires a street vendor to go through a process of obtaining a permit from the city before engaging in that activity. Obviously, we've seen a significant increase in street vending throughout our city. Some locations in particular have been harder hit than others. And this has been a foremost concern of some of our community members who are concerned about things like competing brick and mortar businesses, foodborne illnesses associated with cooking activities on the sidewalk, etc. So the question is, what are we doing to address this problem? And, the answer is much like legal cannabis issues, we have to operate in a very narrow margin with regard to sidewalk vending because, once again, California as a state has decided that such activity is no longer criminal in nature. So long story short is sidewalk vendors have to have a permit to operate in the city. When they obtain that permit, then they can operate their business on a sidewalk that's owned by the city of San Bernardino or in a public park during normal park hours. But they are prohibited from engaging in vending activities on private property. They can sell certain types of foods, packaged foods, not requiring refrigeration, whole uncut fruit. They can also sell general merchandise like you've seen cell phones being offered on the side of the roadway on the sidewalks, but they cannot necessarily cook food on a sidewalk and serve food that's prepared on site. The only time they're able to do that is if they obtain the appropriate permits and licenses from the County Department of Environmental Health. And as of this point, the Department of Environmental Health will not approve any of those types of vendors. So essentially, any vendor that you're seeing out on the sidewalks that is selling cooked food on site is operating in an illegal manner. Unfortunately, up until very recently, only the county could enforce those environmental health codes. And because they're stretched so thin, they were simply unable to do that throughout the county. We have since adopted a new municipal code in the city of San Bernardino that now allows code enforcement officers and police officers to enforce those county environmental health codes within the city limits. So we now have the authority to go out and cite individuals for criminal violations of the municipal code through adoption of the county environmental health code into our municipal code itself. Now, this isn't an end-all problem. Unfortunately, we've got more vendors than we're able to deal with regard to our current staffing at the police department and code enforcement department. However, we do respond to community-based reports of significant problems, whether they be traffic-related issues or other public nuisances associated with sidewalk vendors. And we're certainly routing every case that we can get our hands on through our city attorney's office for prosecution. In addition to that, the the City of San Bernardino Business Registration Division has inspectors that go out and can issue ACP violations for those individuals for not obtaining the appropriate city licenses. Commissioner Elliott, you mentioned, I think 8 or 9 vendors that are currently licensed. I think that's correct. I don't know what the exact number is. It fluctuates a bit. But there are some significant hurdles for an individual to overcome before they are licensed by the city, including obtaining an encroachment permit, having liability insurance of $1 million, having a California Tax and Fee Administration seller's permit, valid ID, and of course that all-important food handler's permit from the county. So long story short, very few of the vendors you see out there are actually licensed and permitted to be operating as they are. But because the state has significantly restricted the city's ability to enforce any criminal violations, it is difficult and challenging for us to address the issue. The slight difference when these folks are operating on private property, once they do that, the California legal structure associated with sidewalk vending goes out the window. They're no longer on that public sidewalk. And so the regular city municipal code requiring a business license and other requirements before operating a business come into play. So when we go out to a situation or scene and someone is selling products from a private parcel or a private piece of property, then it's our normal code enforcement operation where we can cite them criminally for failure to obtain a business license and for potentially violating a conditional use permit for a specific parcel of land. But if they are in fact on the sidewalk and they're doing what would otherwise be lawful activity, as long as they're registered with the city, that operation is currently legal in California.
Now that tends to happen, Captain, on the weekends more than not. So if you get calls of street vendors, how high is that likely to go in your priority calls?
It'll probably be a priority 3, which is the next last priority on our list. A priority 4 would be an old report call or a parking citation. But a priority 3 is an in-progress call that's not violent in nature and not immediately hazardous to the public. So it's something that would be lower on our priority list. And sometimes by the time we're able to get to that call, they've packed up for the night and moved on their way. We're also still testing the waters with regard to our city attorney's ability to prosecute these cases in the court system. So we've already cited several vendors who have been operating unlawfully, and those cases are under review by our city attorney's office. Before we kind of unleash the flood controls with regard to addressing this issue, we want to make sure all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed with regard to how our city attorney wants us to investigate and package these cases so that we don't have any pushback from folks in the community. And especially from the ACLU, which is watching this issue very closely as a representative of those folks who are engaging in food vending on our sidewalks and public places.
Thank you. This is a personal pet peeve of mine that we have so many businesses, brick and mortar businesses, that go through the permitting process, spend their money, get their insurances, do all this stuff right to run their businesses, and then somebody pops up with a cart and takes their customer base away. That's just a personal pet peeve of mine. Questions or comments, commissioners?
Captain Pellis, Jesse. Hey, could you tell us what the consequences of breaking the law when it comes to street vending? Is it of significance? What is the ACP, I think you call it?
Sure. So for an individual who actually has a permit, if they violate a condition of that permit, it's a $100 fine for the first offense, $200 for the second, and $500 for each subsequent offense in 1 year. For an individual who is not permitted through the city's licensing structure, the first offense is $250, second offense $500, and each subsequent offense within a year is $1,000. So if it's activities occurring on private property, and we can actually do a municipal code criminal violation, then the fines are a little bit different, and there's also a possibility for jail time because it is a criminal offense. But the likelihood of a judge actually imposing an incarceration term for unlawful sidewalk vending is extremely low.
And in the incident where somebody is using somebody's property without their awareness, I'm sure that's a problem that you guys see. How is that addressed?
Sure, and it's difficult sometimes to know if it truly is without their permission. We've got information to suggest that some folks take money from these sidewalk vendors to allow them to use their private property in the evening hours. And that is a violation of their business license. It's a violation of the municipal code for a property owner to allow an unauthorized use of that parcel, especially if there's a conditional use permit issued for that location. But with regard to those property owners that simply don't know it's occurring, we can certainly inform them, recommend that they take action to prevent it, whether it be installing fencing or security, but we don't really have a structure in place to mandate that. It's because it's publicly accessible in many cases, whether it's a parking lot or adjacent to a business that's otherwise closed. It's hard to regulate that from the standpoint of holding a property owner accountable for activity that's difficult for them to prevent.
Thank you, Captain.
Sure.
Any others? Questions, comments? Any others?
I just have one quick question.
Commissioner Jarman?
Elliott. Captain Elliott, does that include the?
Whoops. Captain Pellis.
Sorry?
I got promoted, Captain Elliott.
Oh.
I did see Spider-Man show up on our screen a little while ago. I wasn't really sure what happened there either.
Okay.
Daniel.
Anyway, does that include the vendors who are selling fruit and those street drinks like lemonade or the mixed drinks they're selling?
Yes, it does. So a permitted vendor who has gone through the city licensing process is permitted to sell whole uncut fruit. That is legal. But the minute they slice into it and serve a piece, or the minute food is prepared on site like a mixed fruit beverage, that is not authorized by the county Environmental Health Department. And so that would always be prohibited, even if the sidewalk vendor has the appropriate city license.
Okay.
And
All
just
right. I'm sorry.
a quick follow-up, Captain or Jennifer. Do you have much trouble when it comes to the vendor providing ID, or does that get real touchy when it comes to that?
Well, the answer is yes to both. Depending on what type of ordinance we are enforcing, we can sometimes demand ID. And if we're issuing a criminal citation or potentially making a custodial arrest, an individual is required by law to submit their identification to us. But in other cases, they're not. It just depends on the circumstances. A lot of folks don't carry that ID with them, so we do our best to identify them as best as we possibly can through our law enforcement databases and other sources. But it's not always easy to get that identification. Just depends on who we're dealing with and the circumstances involved.
Thank you guys for the good work. I know that can't be easy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you, Lieutenant Corral and Captain Pellis. Thank you again. We're catching up here significantly. The train is running, but we're catching up. And thank all of our departments for getting their reports in. And thank you for the commissioners being patient so we could get those year reports and we get caught back up and get on the next page. All right. Staff report, item number 5, you should have that in your backup. And that is that Public Works is asking us to support the installation of stop signs at 28th and Sierra Way, a 4-way stop, and at State Street and Sheridan Road, a 4-way stop. Again, the backup data, the backups is in your agenda packet. Is there a motion?
I make the motion, Ricardo.
All right, moved by Ricardo. Is that a second?
Second.
Second, Jarman. I'm going to try to pick up the pace here. So, commissioners, go ahead and turn your mics back on so you can all jump in and be ready to roll here. All right. Moved in second to approve and forward the item to council. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you. The record reflects it's unanimous. New business. New business, again, in your agenda packet. Last year, this time, September 9th, 2 years ago, September 9th, 2019, this commission did a letter of support for Chief McBride and what he was doing, or through his leadership was doing at the department, recognizing that we had some new members appointed. We put it on the agenda to reaffirm that position. Again, it's in your agenda packet. I hope you've had a chance to read it. It is an old letter, but just wanted to make sure that we gave the new, I wanted to make sure the new appointees had a chance to chime in on that if they were, if we're still reaffirming our support of Chief McBride. With that,
Chair, I have a
motion.
question.
Let me take a motion on it first.
Yeah,
We get a motion in a
absolutely.
second, and then I'll take the discussion.
Absolutely.
Motion,
Ricardo,
second. No second?
Deanna, second.
Deanna, thank you. All right, now we'll entertain the discussion, Commissioner Peters.
Yeah, my question was, I was looking over this agenda as well as, as you know, I'm a new commissioner, looking
Yes,
at the resolution that established our commission. I didn't see anything in there that basically gives us the authority or allows us to, or whether or not we should provide support as a commission for, hires, right? People that actually are like directors of different departments. So I'm just wondering, is this something that you guys set a precedent for in this commission to do? Is this something that we're going to be doing constantly? I mean, I just personally see a kind of like a conflict of,
I think
of
we took
supporting directors.
I think we took a position simply at that time. Our chiefs were in the midst of transition, if I remember right, and being at public safety, we just took a position on whether we how we felt about the work that had been done by him at that time. So it was a general position. It's not an actual affirming document that said goes into his jacket or something like that. It's just something that went in this case went to the mayor and council of the position of the Public Safety Commission as it related to him and his performance to that point.
Okay, but are we saying that that's within our purview of our commission? I mean, I personally did not see that on there. It's kind of like our bylaws. So.
It was approved, so it was kind of all like, it was approved as almost a receive and file, just a notice to the. It was not a and because me and Councilman Alexander at that time, he was Commissioner Alexander, because we worked on it. It was not meant to be a letter of directing the city manager or council to do anything. It just gave a vibe of how we reflected that we thought the community felt with regard to him at that time.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. On the reaffirmation, there's a motion and a second. Any opposed?
I will abstain from that vote since I wasn't here when that was written.
All right, abstain.
I think I'll abstain also. I think all our police officers do a good job, but I wasn't privy to the conversation before.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then let me get a. I don't think I need a motion to table. It does not pass. All right. Next item on the agenda is item number 7. This again is another issue. It's included in your packet. Worked on again by now Councilman Alexander and myself. We're part of this subcommittee. What happened here was that the police commission used to be one, the fire commission used to be one, the human relations commission used to be its own, and I don't know who public works went through, to be honest with you, but somewhere along the line they combined them all together. It was the feeling, and continues to be the feeling, of Councilman Alexander. It also was it was my feeling, and then the consensus of the commission, that the Human Relations Commission, human relations job, is a job, essentially human relations is to see that all citizens are treated equally. Period. That's human relations. It is an interactive and to make sure that all of our citizens are treated exactly the same. The opinion of us and the commission at that time was that the Human Relations Commission should be its own commission. That it, in fact, public safety, because many times public safety, as we're talking tonight, we're talking about the homeless, and we're talking about arsons, and we're talking about all that. So now, and we're talking about with Captain Palace, how they need to enforce the law and human relations, it was felt at that time, did not belong in there. Really didn't belong in there. It should have remained its own commission to focus on the equal treatment of all of our citizens and residents. We took a position at that time, which is in line with the charter and the Muni Code, that says that the council and the mayor can, at their own will and at their own pleasure, they can separate the commissions back out as determined. This was largely done as a result of the city in bankruptcy, combining stuff together. But given now that we're back where we are, and my personal feeling is that we are hearing an uptick of inequality of treatment. And so the thought process was that we would ask the councilman, and I know when you first got appointed, Commissioner Cervantes, you and I and Councilman Alexander had this conversation that it is the support. We would think that the Human Relations should go back and be its own separate commission that could independently look at the equal treatment of all of our citizens. We took that position then. Again, I took into account that we had new commissioners come on and wanted to bring that back in front of you and not just be like, well, this was our position 5 years ago, so you're bound to it. I wanted to bring it back to you. Clearly, I wasn't the chairman, but I am now. So I wanted to bring it back to you to give our new commissioners a chance to weigh in on these decisions that were made 2 years ago. And this is one of those decisions to separate the Human Relations Commission, ask council to separate it back out and make it its own machine. That I'm the one that put this on the agenda for that reason. Again, my specific reason for both of these was to make sure that the new commissioners got in on decisions we had made some time ago. All right. With that, is there again, there is a document in your backup, which is the letter that we did asking the council members to separate the commissions. It was dated September 9, 2019. Is there support for reaffirming that position?
I'll make a motion, but I'd like to just get a clarity on one thing. When that new letter is written, will we be able to take a look at that?
Absolutely. It has
going to be the same.
No, everything will be brought back before you.
Okay, so moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All right. Move Pete in second. Ricardo. I'm sorry, Tom Buck. Any opposed? All right. Let the record reflect that's unanimous. And with your permission, with a caveat to that, let me ask you all to allow myself and Commissioner Peden to work on the rewrite of this. Is there anybody opposed to that? Okay, so the two of us will work on this, and then we'll get it back to you once we have a draft for you. Okay, next item is during the riots. It's all part of item number 7, by the way. Oh no, it's not, number 8. During the riots, the city largely shut down, many of you know, and there were so many businesses that looked out for the officers and the firefighters and the first responders. That's the way to say it. And they willingly they fed them. I know that they weren't allowing the command was not allowing the officers to stop in businesses at that time because it was kind of the anti-police movement. And so they didn't want the officers, number one, to go in there and potentially somebody say about the business owner, oh, they're with the police, and then destroy the business. And secondly, they didn't want an officer standing up at the counter and get shot. So the officers pretty much, the officers, the firemen, the first responders pretty much stayed out of businesses. And this is the best list that we could put together. Primarily myself and former Commissioner Chaplain Fritz. But all of these businesses, Costco, Raising Cane, all these businesses gave food, gave it. They literally gave it. I mean, for probably 2 months. They gave food to all our first responders in the city, and people didn't have to do it. And so it was a way back then. Again, the police subcommittee just sent a document to the city council acknowledging every business who had gone out of their way and donated to our first responders in the city. And because it had been done by the subcommittee, again, same premise as I had before. We have new commission members. I wanted to make sure everything got in front of you. And so it's completed. It's in your packet. It had never come through the commission. It came through the subcommittee and went to the council floor. Just a simple way of acknowledging every single business in our city who donated food and took care of our first responders when they were out there working 12 and 24-hour shifts. And they brought food into the stations. They took them to the fire stations. They dropped them off. They went and paid for food for 150 people. Just it was amazing. And I thought that with everything, we all want to scream about it, but for these businesses, and it was over 90 businesses, and they were all different businesses, different days. So it wasn't like 90 people came in at once. There was a coordination. You guys were taking care of it on Friday. Okay, we got it Saturday. It was just amazing. And it's just a way of saying, we noticed it, we saw it, we thank you. All right. And so I just wanted to, again, bring that before you. And I think it's just a receive and file. But I wanted to make sure you saw it, you knew about it. And of course, you get to see the names of all these businesses who actually did this. And I entered it as a private citizen into the public comment at the city council. So it was entered back then, but I wanted to bring it before the commission. So a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Moved. Eden, second. Carrillo. Any objections? Consider it unanimous. All right, thank you. Item number 9 is the Mount Vernon detour signage. I don't know who brought this item. I didn't receive anything on it. I don't have any backup.
I brought it up, Terry.
Okay, so I don't have anything. All right, Commissioner Tombach.
All right. Well, I was taking some photographs during the demolition of the bridge. I noticed that there was very inadequate detour signage. That's a very humongous gap, a big giant detour. Mount Vernon was the major thoroughfare going east and west for the city, and people either had to go like 2-3 miles in one direction or a mile or probably a half mile in the other direction to get to where they wanted to go. And but all they had were just detour signs, and it didn't say go down to 2nd Street or take the freeway, or it's just inadequate. I know that if I was driving around, I'd be really frustrated. They're not in my ward. It's just something that I noticed, just something that I thought I'd bring up, and I'm not really sure what standard practice is, but I know that it gets really confusing in that area. Knowing which way to go when.
All right, Alex, can you speak to that?
Yes, I will. I'm not sure what is the request. Is the request to have detour go to 3rd Street, move, because the detour signs is arrows, and these.
Yeah, I've seen them. I think what he's saying is that in his opinion, this is the signage sufficient. Is that what you're saying, Ricardo?
Yeah, instead of saying detour, go to 2nd Street. Or go to whatever street, instead of just kind of relying on the arrows to get you there, because you're going to go follow the arrow, and then, you know, you would think it's maybe only a block long, but it's almost a half mile to get past the freeway till you get to the point to where you can make a right and then make another right and go back to where you started from if you're trying to get to Colton.
We have not received any complaints about this, but let me look at it. I'll make sure, let me see what we can do to help out.
Are the signs electronic, Alex? Are they electronic?
No, it's the detour sign that is with an arrow.
Okay.
These message boards are very expensive, and as the commissioner said, it's a long stretch for us to put electronic signs.
Okay.
We are so far, struggling for the money to get the project going.
Right.
So let me see what I can, how can I make it better. I will talk to our partners. Remember the project is, we're a partner with SPCTA and the contractor that is doing the project. This is a design build project. So let me talk to them. Let me see how we can help out to make it a little bit clear. Maybe I'm not sure if we can add, go to, is the problem that is when you come with the detour signs, when you come to intersection that you can go left or right, is if you put the wrong name, it's people make the wrong direction. So they are following the arrows. So they are following the arrows. And by now, this has been closed for about 3.5 months. People knew where to go and how to get through. But again, I will promise to look into it and see what can I do to make it easier.
Okay, just for clarification, this is not a demand. This is just a suggestion to look at.
Oh, I completely understand. I completely understand. And
I think
we
that's
appreciate
fair.
your guys' opinion, because this is how we know we're doing good or we're doing bad.
I think that's fair.
Yes.
All right. Any other comments on the Mount Vernon Bridge? Okay, great. Item number 10, subcommittees. Now, so again, for the benefit, oops, the lights went out. For the benefit of the new commissioner, when I was not somebody's on the tanky machine or something's going on here. Chris, is that you? Okay. So anyway, I was just a commissioner, and again, I thought that we were so broad. We had police, we had fire, we had public works, and so what I advocated for, just as a commissioner, is that we would divide ourselves off into subcommittees: police, fire, and public works. And there's 9 of us, so it was 3, 3, 3 that we divided off into subcommittees. This enabled us to streamline issues, and it also allowed the department heads to know who they could communicate with without getting into Brown Act issues and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we had a police committee, a police subcommittee, a fire subcommittee, and a public works subcommittee. The fire subcommittee, Councilman Damon Alexander was the chair of the fire subcommittee. Commissioner Lanas and Commissioner Jarman were on fire. Public Works was Commissioner Torres from Ward 5 also, with Mr. Walters and Ms. Kelly. And then on police was Ricardo, Chaplain Fritz, and me, on those 3. What I'd like to do is try to get our new, see if everybody's okay, and if not, we want to get our new commissioners grafted in this. My personal, I did have a conversation with Councilman Alexander, who appointed Commissioner Cervantes, and he asked that she would be recommended for the police subcommittee. Also, I know that Councilman Reynoso's big issue is the environment and public works, and I'm thinking Commissioner Peden would make a great chair for the public works. That's just me thinking. And then perhaps Ricardo, since having been on fire, could go back to fire subcommittee to deal with that. That's me. I'll open it up. Anyone want to suggest any of them you'd like to be on, and we'll just go that route.
I just have a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
Just clarification again.
Yes.
So we're on these different subcommittees. Are we still meeting as a general body to go over what you guys are discussing, what you're recommending to council?
Yeah. So what
we're still
happens
part
is
of that process?
yes. So the thought process was when things come in. Now, what should have come in? I mentioned tonight some things came on agenda I wasn't aware of. That should never happen. Never should that happen. It should always come in if it is a public works issue. If it's somebody calls and somebody says this, automatically Susie would then forward that item over. In this case, if using my scenario, if you were the chair of that, it would get forwarded to you. You could then have a conversation with Alex along with the other two commissioners on the subcommittee. By the time we come back at our next meeting, you guys have already reviewed it. You've already talked to people, and you're coming back with us with a potential solution or telling us, yes, I'm on it. Yes, we're checking on it. No, it's not worth anything, whatever the case may be. And it's sort of streamlined and got some of the questions out of the way, or, many times citizens call. They call us and say, I can't get that. And so we can talk as a body as long as there's never a majority of us. So we could always, as long as there was 4 of us, then we get to talk. But that's not fair to the other 5. So if it's a public works issue, then we would send it to the public works chairman, and you would go to work on it with your people or whatever, however that works, and be ready to report back. If it's a fire issue, I'll call you in a minute. If it's a fire issue, then we would shoot it over to the fire subcommittee chairman, and they would get with Captain Mejia, whatever, work through it and bring us back sufficient backup that we could make a decision as a whole. Likewise, same thing with police. And those are the 3 bodies that we are charged over. And so I thought it gave us a way to do it and not get ourselves all where everybody's waiting for, if it's Alex we got to talk to, or if it's the chief or Chief Mejia, whatever. That's the concept. So the answer to your question, it's short, was yes, it will ultimately end back up in the hands of the body. But I think it allows the commission to respond faster, and it gives the department heads a contact where they're not, we sat here tonight and 10 different opinions and ideas and thoughts go into place. And that's just not going to work. It's not productive at all times. So it allows the subcommittee to get to it, shoot it, come back with backup, bring it to the full commission with a recommendation, or whatever the case may be. We took a look at it. We're not ready yet, or whatever the case may be. That's the thought process. Does that answer your question? You're muted, sir. Whoops.
Again, it does. I just wanted to clarify that, say I'm working on the public works part of this subcommittee, I'm still going to have a voice in what's going on with public safety in terms of police. If I have something I want to get on the agenda, that's still open for discussion.
Absolutely. This was just if you, let's say that there ended up being a call. Alex mentioned it a few minutes ago, where they put in no parking signs over on Johnson Street. Well, there ended up being a big old issue with the community about cars over there, and you couldn't walk, and people almost hit a kid. So we got on the phone real quick, and they started working on it. And by the time it got to us, it was at council. I think within 6 weeks they had it done. And so, but we came back and brought full back what happened, and everybody still votes. So it's the subcommittee is just to narrow the work interim. So that's the issue. All right. I heard somebody else.
Yeah, Ricardo.
Yes.
We're missing the HR committee. Are we going to do an HR committee?
Or is that
going to be committee less?
I think I think what I mean, it's up to us. What I think is what we did tonight is we approved notifying council that we wanted to split HR back out. And so how about, if you'll agree, let's leave that out for 60 days and give the council a chance to get back to us. And then if that is not successful, then if it's your pleasure, then if it's our pleasure, then we'll just create an HR subcommittee.
All right, then I have another question. It's my understanding that if you do have a subcommittee meeting, that we're going to have an open meeting with and have it recorded, much like what we're doing now, only with 3 people. We've done that before when we were talking about, I forget what issue we were trying to discuss, but half the time we couldn't meet because we had to have Susie at the meeting, we had to have someone from City Hall at the meeting, and it had to be an open meeting for the community. Otherwise, it'd be violating the Brown Act. So
the issue
I may need correction on this, but that's what I observed in the past.
Yeah, the issue is to remember, the subcommittee is if we need to use legal terms, it's an ad hoc. So it is components of this commission. It is not a governing entity on its own, which is specifically what Commissioner Peden was talking about. So it is only to do, I mean, 2 of you, 3 of you can talk on the phone. That's what we've done over the past year. If something came up, you're able to talk about what to bring to the commission. So you're a committee of the commission, not of the public. So you're able to only talk about what to bring forward to the full commission.
Well,
I did check it with the city attorney.
Okay, well, if you checked it with the city attorney, I'd like to see it on paper because I don't want to be violating the Brown Act. I would like to have something official from the city saying that we are allowed to do that before we actually do this.
We've actually done it for 2 years, Ricardo.
But
that's fine. You can. You're. That's your position.
Yeah.
Commissioner Creel.
Yes. In response to your conversation, this is my first commission. I went ahead and went online and did a little study on the Brown Act. My question to you: would you have any kind of training so that I would be comfortable with how the communication works? Because it got pretty deep, pretty quick, and I want to make sure that that I'm in compliance.
Yeah,
and do everything right.
Through the city attorney's office, or through your council member or appointer, there is, but the city clerk and the city attorney's office has a Brown Act packet that they can get to you. Brown Act is pretty simple. It is that the majority of the commission cannot act on its own in any setting unless it's public. The commission is appointed by the mayor and council. So we are a quasi governing body, or certainly, albeit advisory. We are. That's why we couldn't meet. We're trying to get all of this up. The committees, subcommittees, they're only called subcommittees. The subcommittees are subcommittees of the commission. They're never public. They only report back to the commission in their specific areas. But yes, I will see to it that at least I'll ask Susie to reach out to the city attorney and city clerk and get all of us data on the Brown Act. Although the Brown Act is a part of your folder. Did they give you a folder, a notebook when they swore you in?
You know what? It was today, so
okay.
I had
so
to
it's in that notebook. It's in that.
Like
notebook.
I said, I did take the time. Los Angeles had one, San Diego had one, and Palo Alto. In fact, one qualified for a college course, but I like personal instruction. But I can
look in your book,
Mr.
Creel,
I can see the point with
in your book.
With a subcommittee, how that would be very good, because I just see so many times in government things take too long. So I like that
I
idea.
agree. Great, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Commissioner Jarman?
Yes, I never got a copy of the Brown Act, even though it's online.
All right, what we'll do, what we'll ask Susie to do is to make sure that everybody gets an email copy of it. Is that fair?
That'll work.
We can ask Susie, and she can reach out to the city attorney, or the city manager or city clerk, and make sure everybody on the commission gets a copy of it.
And
I'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And Walter,
Right.
just to be clear, the online videos, because I did read the Brown Act, and the videos were very helpful, and they use excellent examples. So that's why I responded to the subcommittee. I like that idea. But if you go to Palo Alto, San Diego, and LA on the videos, they do a real good job. So the packet would be helpful to see the actual verbiage, but the videos are there. They help me a lot.
All right, great. Any other comments on this?
Just a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I was brought by neighbors a few weeks ago about stop signs due to accidents and things here on Valencia and Linwood where it comes off of 30th. Would that be public safety or public works?
Well, it's all part of public safety, but it would be public works.
Right. That's okay.
Now, actually, you are making my point when I fought for this 2 years ago, and that was, you got a phone call about an issue there. All you had to do is pick up and call the chairman of the Public Works Subcommittee, and then he goes to work.
Okay.
And
Sounds good.
he would talk to Alex or Chris or whoever they talk to. Then he come back before we meet and talk to the other two on his subcommittee and say, you know, this is what happened. Da, 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 da. So instead of us going through all this we went through tonight, we would entertain 3 reports: a report of the police subcommittee, the fire subcommittee, the public safety or public works subcommittee, and whatever else you guys wanted to add on the agenda. And that's how all the workup would be done in the background. When city council gets ready to do agendas and stuff, staff does all of the back work. So you have a staff report in a 1,000-page agenda packet. We don't have staff. We have Susie, who has another full-time job. So on little things, we can make a phone call and work all this, and not through one chairman, but through all of us working together to make all this happen, and it's kind of cohesive. That was my whole thought process when I first recommended this, and it passed.
Okay.
All right. So let's do this quickly. If we're in agreement, all we need to do is ask who would desire to work where. Again, my personal recommendation, but you're able to recommend whoever you want for Public Works, is our new commissioner, Commissioner Peden, be the chairman of that subcommittee, and continue to leave Commissioner Walters and Kelly on that commission, on that subcommittee. Are you opposed to that, Commissioner Peden? He shook his head. No, he's
No, I'm not opposed to that. I'm fine with
great.
that.
Okay. And on fire subcommittee, where Councilman Damon Alexander was previously the chair of fire subcommittee, my recommendation there is that Commissioner Tombuck, who has extensive experience with the fire commission, that he would take that seat where Councilman Alexander was as the chair of the fire subcommittee, and that Maria Lanes and Walter Jarman would be joined with him on that fire subcommittee. Are you opposed to that?
I'd rather stay on the police committee because that's where I have the majority of my 30 years of experience.
Okay, so that means you will not serve on the fire committee. All right, is there someone else who's interested who would serve on the fire subcommittee? There's only 9 of us, so we got to split it 3 by 3 by 3. Who would serve on the fire subcommittee? We already have Maria Lanes and Walter Jarman on there. Commissioner Jarman, would you accept the chair of the fire subcommittee?
I would, Mr. Chairman. I was going to request the police committee since most of my experience.
Is that what you want? Is that what you want? Okay, so I don't have anybody on fire yet. All right, let me go on to police. All right. Again, I mentioned that Councilman Alexander, who appointed Commissioner Cervantes, personally asked that she would be recommended to the police subcommittee. And I am on that one. And also Commissioner Fritz, who is no longer with us, was replaced by Commissioner Carrillo on that one. But looks like that's the one we're going to do. So let's do nominations for the police subcommittee.
For police or fire?
Police.
Well, that's the one I want to be on. So
Okay, Tom Buck,
I'd like to do police if that's
Carrillo, German, correct? Is that correct, sir?
I prefer police, but I
Okay. All right, German.
I'll serve with the fire. I'll
Okay.
serve.
Yeah, I prefer police.
Okay, well, we got 3 slots and 8 people. So we got to get Jarman. All right, so Tumbuk, Carrillo, Jarman, Elliott, and I need fire. Are you saying you'll go over to fire, Jarman?
Yes. Yeah, I'll serve with fire.
Okay. All right. So then that leaves Tumbuk, Carrillo, and Elliott, which was what I originally said. Oh no, who am I missing? I'm missing Cervantes. All right. So I gotta vote each one of them. Okay. Those in favor, this is on police subcommittees, the subcommittee. Let's start with yours truly, Elliott. All right, let's start with that one. Any opposers? Great.
Can I jump in on this just real fast? I'm sorry to interrupt the voting.
Yes, sir. Yes,
It's
sir.
hard for me to make a decision on, or if I'm going to vote on. I don't know any of these folks or their expertise. So, I mean, I really don't know how to vote in terms of this. So, I'm going to have to abstain on this. I don't know if you were calling for a vote from every
And that's okay.
but
Yeah, that's fine. Again, it's only a subcommittee, and the job of the subcommittees is not to make policy or anything like that. It's only to gather information and bring it back to the full commission. So whatever that is, we just want to streamline who's doing what. Okay. All right. One abstention.
Chairperson, can I make a suggestion that might streamline things? I think it's an acceptable practice for someone to be on several committees and not necessarily be tied into one. So if we are allowed to overlap on committees, I think that might solve the problem in terms of
what I want to make certain of, I think what we want to make certain of is that all 9 of us are assigned to committees. There's only 9. I think, and then if we hit 4 on the magic number, now we're running right into Brown. So we need to stay at 3 on each, and there's 9 of us. So we can't, we can choose to reorganize it some kind of a way, but right now we just need to staff it, and then we can always, this is at will. This was designed to streamline what we're doing. But in 3 months, we don't like it, you change it. The commission's will is always what works. So it's that simple. We could throw the subcommittee process out altogether. I just found it worked better, thought it would work better, and not, anyway, yeah. So back to where I'm at. Yes, sir.
Chairman, if I may, is it possible we could table this until our next meeting?
I think we're required to do our elections And since we've been out, we're doing our elections, quote unquote, we're required to do that. And then, but what we can always do is we can come back and redress it. So now that is in statute. We're required to do our elections, but we can always come back and readdress it.
But this
So,
time,
Yeah, but I don't think commissions are they're just concerned, I think, with the position of
Chair.
the chairperson and co-chair. I don't think that the commission subcommittee.
which is what I'm trying to achieve tonight. That's all I'm trying to achieve. That right there. If I get that done, then we can work through the other pieces of it. So, the only thing I have here is I have, let's just support. Is there support for Carrillo being on police subcommittee?
Well, I think the problem is nobody knows Carrillo.
I don't know Carrillo. I agree, but he's expressing interest in wanting to be there.
Can-
All
can we
right,
ask-
so how about we do this? Let's do this. Let's we've already accepted Commissioner Peden. Let's go with Jarman says he would do fire. Ricardo says he doesn't want to do fire. So Jarman on fire, Peden on public works, and Elliot on police. Will we accept those three as chairs of the subcommittees now, and we'll come back to the members recalendar for next meeting? Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
And then if any of you will get a chance, us three will get a chance to talk with staff and with city attorney and all that, kind of get gauge on what you said to your people. Then by the next meeting, we can come back. If any of us don't want to do it, we can simply step down and let it go back up again. And then at that time, we can take on the extra 2 members to come on to the subcommittees. So at least we'll have the chairs done. That's acceptable, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any opposers to that?
No, I
All right.
just have,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
is there a
Kelly.
way that maybe we could submit what our backgrounds are? Just a short little thing,
Yes,
what our
I agree with
backgrounds
that. Now, I do want to say too, I know this to be a fact. I was going to get into it in the announcements, but I know this to be a fact with somebody's dog is after somebody. With police, you're going to need to do your. They're going to give you a document so that there's vetting because those on the police subcommittee have access to the department and et cetera, et cetera. So you have to fill out a volunteer application, blah, 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 and they do the background and all that. So that sets up a little bit. One of the reasons Russ Fritz and myself and Tom Buck were on it last year was because we were already cleared and vetted. We're inside, as it were. We had already gone through the background research. Tom Buck worked there 40 years, maybe 45. But so it's fine if we accept the chairs. We can get the applications out to all of you, and then we can get everybody's whatever. I think we're making more of this than it is. It's just a subcommittee back to the commission. It's not a presidential commission. It's just a subcommittee to help us streamline our efforts.
No, but maybe if you had just a little background on each person, it might give you a better idea where you want to place them in your subcommittees.
What I tried not to do is I tried to let the commission decide rather than taking a chair and saying appoint. Although it was only one meeting, I tried to let the whole group decide, and I'm open to that. I think again, the only thing we could really do or should really do because of public record is to bring in potentially the application that was filed with your appointer, because that is public record. Your application that was put up, and there were certain strikeouts and things like that were done on it. That's what was presented to the public. I don't want to get into violating people's privacy, but that's public, the actual application. And so I just suggest maybe you just look at them online. But I think we can pull them down if need be and put them into the record. I just didn't really want to go through all that. I think we're making it deeper than it is. But when you start getting into, anything we present on paper as part of a commission is part of the record. Whatever was all of our positions sitting on this commission and any commission is at the privilege of our appointers, which means our appointers, who are the city councilmen and the mayors and et cetera, they made a decision that we were qualified to sit on this commission, and they put us here. So now it's just a matter of us feeling as individuals, in my opinion, where you would best serve and work and how we make it work. That's kind of it. But I'm happy to present, to get together, or actually, I'm not even happy to do that. Just to tell you to look online at the appointers position they took when they appointed each person. I heard when they appointed Commissioner Peden, and his background was laid out. In addition to that, there was an application there with all the data. And but again, that's not ours to second guess. That was Councilman Reynoso's choice, his sole choice, and that's the end of that. So it's a matter of where you feel most comfortable as it relates in here. I think it's going way far out of the realm that we belong to go further than that. Commissioner Cervantes.
Okay, so where do we need somebody? If we have 9, that means we have 3 on each. Where do we need somebody on fire?
We need someone on fire. We need someone on fire. Yes.
Okay, so if I went to fire, then we'd have 3 on each.
We would have on fire. One of them is not here tonight, but what was on fire was Councilman Alexander. I'm saying Commissioner Jarman and Commissioner Lanas.
Because we basically have 3 on each except for fire,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go to fire because I'll take it for the team. I'll go to fire. I don't mind learning. I'm a team player, and if everybody's happy with where they're at, then we'll do that. Because I'm already involved with my neighborhood watch with the police already, so I do that separately. So I can go to fire. I'm willing to learn that. If everybody's happy with where they're at, so we can move on. It's almost 9 o'clock.
Absolutely.
It's not that big of a deal.
I just add one comment. I also am flexible. Certainly being a new commissioner, I want to work with you guys. The only reason I say police is that's probably the least ignorant that I am in any capacity. I did work a lot with the police to get some things done in our community, and I don't have the background for fire and safety. So I just want to make that clear. But
yeah, what I want to
with you guys.
Yeah, and again, and that's why I went through a little bit of a litany on it to tell you that there's a background process, a background check process, and things like that. And so I'm open to wherever you are.
I appreciate
I just
it.
want to respect everybody's privacy. That's all.
And also, I concur with Mr. Pedens or Commissioner Pedens' viewpoint. I'm so new that for me to vote, or this is like until I get my feet wet, but I so appreciate you guys working with me. And
well, a lot of this wouldn't be, honestly, a lot of this wouldn't be before you because it's already been done. I made a decision that as new commissioners, you needed to know what had been done. And so I asked for it to be put back on the agenda so that you could see, what was already done. Not just be like, oh, we handled that 6 months ago and you're at the, I asked for it to come back on so you could see what we actually have been done, what the commission has been doing. So you kind of got some idea of where we were. So under normal circumstances, that would be the case. All right. Now, lastly, let me move to the last thing is our election of a chair and a vice chair. Currently, for me, this will be my second meeting. But because I'm a pastor, I just know how Robert's Rules of Order. But Commissioner Tombak was our vice chair, but Commissioner Tombak served the year prior as chairman of the commission. We did not, our current crew, me included, we got elected, we had one meeting and got shut down. We have done absolutely zero as chairman and as current officers. And so what I was going to ask to do is to ask you to sustain that we actually stay in our place and finish out our term. We didn't get to do it. We didn't get to do anything. We got shut down. So on my personal plea, I'd like to actually do it. But again, Ricardo Tombach did serve as chairman a year before and was voted in as vice chairman. But that's what I'd like to do. But it's your privilege and your pleasure. We got elected. We came to a meeting and said we were elected and got shut down. And we've never seen each other since. But I'd like to finish the term. So meaning I'd like to be reseated to actually get my term to be done. I don't know if that's the feeling of Ricardo Tombach, but that's my little campaign speech.
I'll make a motion to keep the same organization structure we have right now in terms of chair and co-chair.
I second it.
Not structure, people.
Wonderful.
People.
Sorry, people.
All right. So the motion is that that I remain and that Commissioner Tombach remain. I heard you, sir. And there was a second. So a motion by Pete and a second by Cervantes, and then there's discussion by Jarman. Sir.
Well, I was gonna say that even though you were elected last year, we were sitting there to do the election. You could renominate both the two of you and do our vote.
Yes, sir.
Instead of the motion, when the motion doesn't satisfy the requirement, does it?
Well, I mean, I can pull out my Robert's rules.
Because in actuality,
yeah, we can just do it simple, which is why I just explained it. It was Elliott and Tombach.
right.
So it would be he renominated the tickets. So and there was a second on it by Cervantes. So that's a renomination and a second. All right. Commissioner Creel. Did you have your hand up, sir?
I'm sorry?
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that was for an earlier comment.
Okay. All right. So the motion is to renominate Elliott and Ricardo and keep the same team for the 21 calendar year. Although we're in March, elections, according to the bylaws, were done in January. So we're not talking about March to March. We're talking about March to January. All right. That in mind, are there any opposers? Any opposers? All right. The record reflects it's unanimous. All right. Are there now, finally, we have made it to the finish line. Let me also...
Terry, real quickly, is there anybody that would like to be co-chair?
Anybody would like to serve as vice chair? Anybody willing to serve as vice chair? Say, I'll do it.
I've already had the opportunity of being the chair and co-chair for 2 years in a row, and I have no problems. If somebody wants to take my position, that's fine.
Commissioner Peden?
Well, I was just going to say I'm always willing to serve, so it's up to the body, though.
All right. So, are you withdrawing your name, Commissioner Tombach?
No, I was just saying that maybe we should, at least for my position, we can have an election and a vote.
All right, Commissioner Peden, Commissioner Tombach for vice chair. Anyone else? Did we lose somebody? We may have lost our quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, we're good. Okay. Anyone else for vice chair? We have those in favor of Commissioner Peden. Say aye. Aye, I'll take it. All right. He didn't even vote for himself.
Aye. I'm always on mute. Aye.
All right. That's 2 of us. All right. Those for Commissioner Tombach.
Aye.
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 He brought the motion and then voted for himself. All right. So we're back where we were in the beginning. Everything remains the same. All right. Thank you very much. That was quite fruitful. The last thing on the agenda is announcements or reports. Again, forgive me. for being a little lengthy tonight, but we wanted to bring everybody up to speed. And again, I put things on the agenda that probably shouldn't have been there, but I wanted to make sure that the new commissioners were up to date as to where we were. Okay. I also will get all of you, I will ask Susie to make sure that all of you get the application to complete so that you can complete it for your background. One of the other things we asked you to do, we voted to do, was that every member of the commission would schedule and do at least one annual ride-along a year with PD. And that was because we felt like we needed to see what they're doing out there, be a part of it. And so we all agreed that every one of us would do at least one. We would aim for two, but we would do at least one. And so Susie will get you out packets. Right now, the ride-alongs are not moving. And am I right, Captain Palace? He's still there. His picture is. His picture's still there.
It just took me a second to mute myself. So
we're ride-alongs because of COVID. We're not back up on that yet, right?
correct. That's correct.
Oh,
Yeah, we
okay.
don't want to put our officers in a position to have to be in a car with someone they don't know for a 10-hour shift.
Right. We understand. And then Susie, if we understood it correctly from before, we have to actually select the day that we're available to do the ride along and then turn the packet in with that day on it, correct?
Yes, the background will be checked when the application is submitted.
Okay, so why don't we'll hold up on the ride-alongs, but just remind all the new ones, all the new commissioners that we agreed to do at least one a year. And so what we'll do is come back to you and let you know as soon as PD says, the ride-alongs are back okay. And then you actually will pick your own day and then turn in the paperwork, and then they do whatever they do. Okay, so we'll just bring it back to you as soon as we know, as soon as PD gives us heads up that they're back at it. Okay. Announcements, anything else? Remind you, if you have an issue between our next meeting that is fire related, reach out to Commissioner Jarman. You need that phone number. Susie will see to it that you'll get a document that has all of our phone numbers and contact information. That's for your information only. I'll ask us, we may have ways to reach each other that the general public doesn't. So I'll ask us to respect each other's privacy. You'll have a direct link to reach out to somebody. Please do not violate their privacy and give that out. For me, if I want to give out my number, I'll give it out. If I give it to you, it's for you. And generally, you got one of those numbers that only Jesus calls on. That means you can actually get me. So if we give out our personal information, particularly our chairs, our subcommittee chairs, and you have an issue with fire, please reach directly out to Commissioner Jarman right away. There's an issue, a public works issue or environmental issue, a CEQA issue, any of that, please reach directly out to Commissioner Peden. And if there's an issue PD related, please reach directly out to me right away, and we will get on it. And by the time we get ready to set the agenda, I will talk to those two chairpersons, and that's the stuff that will get on the agenda for the full commission. Okay? So please do that. Announcements and reports. Let's go around the room. Commissioner Carrillo. By the way, we didn't officially do this before we got in the dogfight. We need to welcome Commissioner Carrillo to our Public Safety Commission. He is a new appointee. I believe he was appointed by the mayor. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
That's the mayor's appointment that replaced Chaplain Fritz. Also, Commissioner Peden, we welcome him. That was an appointment that was appointed by by Councilmember Reynoso, and we welcome him to the team.
Thank you.
My understanding is he brings a ton of experience to our city and to our commission, from Rialto, Riverside, everywhere else. So we're happy to have him. All right. That's what I heard in the meeting. Heard that in the meeting. And also we want to welcome Commissioner Cervantes, who is the appointee of our former member, now Councilman Damon Alexander of the 7th Ward. And we want to welcome her to our team. All right? I did it the way I'm supposed to do it, politically correct now. Going around the room. Announcements or reports? Commissioner Ricardo.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Peden.
No reports.
Thank you. Commissioner Cervantes.
No reports.
No announcements, no nothing. Commissioner Carrillo.
No reports.
Commissioner Kelly.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Also, I'll be in touch with you all. Anybody have their polo with them? I'll be in touch with you all on how to get your polos and stuff ordered. I'll be in touch with all of our new members to tell you how to do that and set you up so you can get that done. You have yours, Ricardo?
They messed it up, and I took it back to them, and they said they were going to call me, and they never called me, and I called them up, and I said, hey, I want it. And
Ricardo, you should have been a preacher. You talk longer than a preacher or a lawyer. Is there a move to adjourn? Move to adjourn.
Oh, I am moved to adjourn.
I don't know who did it, but it's moved. All right. All right. Our meeting is adjourned. For the record, I'm sorry, Susie, for the record, before we close, your meeting agenda packet tonight says March 8, 2020. And when I call the meeting to order, I use that date. It is actually March 8, 2021 for the record. Your packet, put it right where you can see it. It says March 8, 2020. So if you just clarify that for the record. We're adjourned. God bless you. Welcome all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a